advocacy. Not to mention that he himself is battling the threat of a rising political star back home, opposition leader Peter Magyar, who is positioning to steal his crown. But there are reasons for the Hungarian leader to feel optimistic. In France, President Macron has gambled on national elections, which could see a resurgence of far-right politics. And in America, populist Donald Trump is neck and neck with President Biden ahead of elections in November. The political landscape may yet shift further to the advantage of Mr. Orbán. Our third expert witness suggests that the leader may well be inclined, therefore, to hold out for the much longer game.
The likes of Orbán do not want to demolish the European Union. They want to keep it, but they want to take it over, reform it, and to tailor it to their own worldview. And having the presidency is one step. What I think matters really is Orbán's grand vision about European politics.
This episode of The Inquiry was presented by me, Tanya Beckett. The producer is Louise Clark, and the editor is Tara McDermott. It was researched by Matt Toulson and mixed by Richard Hannaford.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Magandang umaga, good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And good morning as well to the folks who are streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Good morning also to Heather Wells at your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Hello.
Well, vacant building owners in Winnipeg could face tougher standards for boarding up their properties. The Executive Policy Committee has passed a motion from Mayor Scott Gillingham that would apply the city's strictest boarding rules to all vacant buildings. Gillingham says vacant buildings pose a risk to city staff and to emergency responders. We're going to hear more from the mayor coming up. And an unlicensed massage therapist accused of sexually assaulting women at his home in rural Manitoba has been found not guilty. Those stories and more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. And lots to come on the program today. In our 7 o'clock hour, for some swimmers, high levels of E. coli along Albert Beach has put a damper on summer fun, but that doesn't have to be the case. We'll hear from a microbiologist about why he says there's no need to worry. If you are camping for the first time this summer and you don't have a parent or close family member to help, you do have a friend just a phone call away. More on the Scouts Canada helpline. That's coming up at 7:40. In our first hour of the program, Canada is becoming the car theft capital of the world, now ranking among the top 10 worst countries in Interpol's stolen vehicle database. We'll get reaction to that story. First, though, what all our recent wet weather means for berry fields. You will recall that it was quite wet not long ago. More from the owner of a Haskell orchard about how bumper their berry-picking crop has looked so far. Yes, I wrote that, and it's tripping me up. Oops, so sorry. We'll have that conversation coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app as well on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. There are now heat warnings in effect for northern Manitoba, including the Paw, Flin Flon, Cranberry Portage. We'll keep you up to date on the weather forecast for Winnipeg today. Expecting more sunny conditions with a high of 29 with a humidex. It'll feel like 33. Stay tuned. World Report is standing by.
Camila Cabello has been a pop star most of her life, starting out in the group Fifth Harmony, then a solo career, that big song Havana, Ooh Na Na. Camila will tell you about her more experimental new record and how to use the internet when everyone is kinda mean. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has a vision for Canada's armed forces, and he's now sharing the idea. In a recent video, Poilievre calls for a cultural shift and increased military spending. The CBC's Catherine Cullen has been asking what it would take to pull that off.
Have a strong military with a warrior culture, not a woke culture.
In a video about his Quebec road trip, Pierre Poilievre reflects on potential changes to Canada's military. The Conservative leader recently told a journalist in BC if he becomes Prime Minister, he'd end what he calls the woke culture. Poilievre's office would not offer specifics about what that means. Defense analyst Dave Perry says some in the military feel there's been too much focus on challenges facing the forces rather than their core function.
There is a bit of a need for a rebalancing in the narrative around our armed forces to have more of a focus on a warrior mentality, because that's needed for the current times.
But Perry says a concentration on core military capabilities means spending on items like fighter jets and tanks. Poilievre's office says that if elected, he, quote, will work towards meeting Canada's NATO spending commitment. The military alliance expects all members to spend 2% of GDP on the armed forces, something Canada hasn't done for decades.
You know, I'll be frank with you. I think the challenge will be less than it was in the last number of years because of the geopolitics of what's happening all around us.
Former Defense Minister Peter MacKay says he believes with wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, amongst other tensions, the public is more open to greater military spending. But Perry says given Poilievre's desire to balance the federal budget, also finding billions needed to reach the NATO target will be tricky. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
NATO leaders are also boosting their military spending on Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden made this announcement at their summit yesterday in Washington.
The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems.
Ukraine is under constant heavy bombardment from Russia, and President Volodymyr Zelensky has been calling for these additional systems. NATO leaders are still working towards a final communique. Child welfare reform is an urgent issue on many First Nations, and what it could look like is being discussed today in Montreal. Assembly of First Nations chiefs are talking about a new offer from the federal government, but as Olivia Stefanovich reports, they still don't have an exact dollar figure.
I don't know what the deal is, right? That's why I'm in the dark.
Cross Lake Band Chief David Muniaz left yesterday's closed-door meeting early as the Assembly of First Nations held private talks about reforming the foster care system that he says were short on details.
We should be part of that, being these are our children, these are our communities, these are our families.
Muniaz, one of several AFN chiefs frustrated with how discussions are going after National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak told the Assembly the federal government proposed a new deal but couldn't say how much it's worth.
While this offer is under settlement privilege, I can tell you today it's a very significant offer, chiefs.
Ottawa previously committed more than $40 billion for First Nations child welfare. Over $20 billion will soon be used to compensate First Nations children and families, but the rest is still under negotiation.
We can't let Canada off the hook.
Judy Wilson is attending the AFN for the Osoyoos Indian Band in BC. She's worked on fixing the First Nations child welfare system for almost 2 decades and says she won't be rushed into accepting just any deal.
There definitely needs to be accountability.
The AFN says it plans to hold a separate meeting for chiefs to vote on Ottawa's new child welfare offer, scheduled to take place in Winnipeg this fall. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Montreal.
Grassy Narrows First Nation is appealing to an international human rights commission for help with its mercury contamination problem. Roughly 1,000 people live there and eat fish from the river. It's been contaminated by decades of industrial activity, and about 90% of the population experiences symptoms of mercury poisoning. Grassy Narrows is suing the Ontario and Canadian governments. It wants the contamination to be cleaned up, and it's asking the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to help put pressure on government. The Canadian government has bought an airplane hangar in the north. Some experts say the $9 million investment does not go far enough to protect the Arctic, And they're concerned it's insufficient to compete with infrastructure in China and Russia. Natalie Pressman reports.
The hangar sits next to a NORAD base in Inuvik, Northwest Territories, and Mayor Clarence Wood says he's been lobbying Ottawa to buy it for years.
The government of Canada, I think, became interested when the only offers were coming in from places like China and Russia.
In January, Public Services and Procurement Canada bought the structure for $8.6 million. It had long been leased by the Department of National Defence, but the department canceled the lease in 2021, and the hangar went up for sale in 2022. Owner Les Kapladiak says most buyer interest was out of China and Russia.
Canadians underestimate the value of our assets in general.
DND did not respond to CBC's questions prior to deadline on why it bought the hangar, but Northern leaders say that Canada needs more Arctic infrastructure. Dennis Patterson is the former senator from Nunavut.
Russia is bristling with air bases, military bases, deep sea ports, and we have virtually none on our Arctic coast. So we're completely vulnerable.
Patterson says he's been advocating for Arctic defense infrastructure for decades.
I'm glad it's being finally addressed, but it took a long time and a lot of work to draw that issue to Canada's attention.
The federal government is currently in the process of extending the runway in Inuvik. Once complete, it will be about 2,700 meters in length, making it the longest paved runway in northern Canada. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The remnants of Hurricane Beryl are expected to arrive in parts of Ontario and Quebec today. Rainfall warnings are in effect for southern and eastern Ontario and eastern Quebec. That rain is expected to taper off tomorrow. Beryl is the earliest Atlantic storm to ever reach Category 5 hurricane status. Alberta is reversing its ban on grizzly bear hunting. The species is endangered. New provincial regulations now allow a small group of hunters to shoot and kill grizzlies. There are conditions. Among them, the bears have to be considered a problem. As CBC's Terry Reith tells us, not everyone is on board with the decision.
The incidences are increasing. The population is increasing.
Todd Lowen, Alberta's Minister of Forestry and Parks, says grizzly bears are a big problem in the province. 2 hikers and their dog were killed by a grizzly near Banff last fall. Grizzlies were also blamed for the loss of 22 sheep and lambs on a southern Alberta ranch this spring. Lowen says the province needs to make changes.
It's really about responding to rural Albertans and their concerns.
The new regulation strips away an 18-year prohibition on hunting grizzlies. The government will issue permits based on a lottery system. Hunters will be given a specific date range and region with the objective of killing bears that are causing problems to people and livestock. The plan worries conservationists.
In those cases, the situation needs to be dealt with by the appropriate wildlife official, somebody who is a professional and trained to deal with these circumstances.
Devon Earle, a conservation specialist at the Alberta Wilderness Association, says the changes took her group by surprise.
It should be coming from the researchers and the scientists who are really the best informed on the topic.
Grizzly bears were declared a threatened species in 2010 when they numbered about 700 in Alberta. The province says there are now more than 1,100. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Canada's dream of winning its first Copa America title is over. The men's soccer team lost 2-0 to Argentina thanks to goals by team superstars Lionel Messi and Julian Alvarez.
Fantastic game for sure. We had a great time. I mean, it's Argentina, that's the best team in the world, but the Canadians did really, really well, so we're really proud of them.
First time Canada makes it this far in any tournament, I think, so I think it was kind of historic, even though they lost. I think it was worth being here.
We drove all the way down from Toronto to support our team, and I think the boys did us proud. They played a great game.
More than 80,000 fans filled MetLife Stadium in New Jersey to watch the historic match. It was Canada's first time ever at the tournament. Gameplay is not over, though. Canada's men will play for third place on Saturday. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Maligayang umaga, magandang umaga. Hello, Manitoba. Faith Fondal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Canada is becoming the car theft capital of the world, now ranking among the top 10 worst countries in Interpol's stolen vehicle database. We'll hear about what that means for a bunch of different things. Stay tuned for that conversation. There's a new study showing more screen time can mean poor emotional regulation and coping mechanisms for young children. More on the connection between screen time and children's development and how parents can teach their kids self-regulation. First, though, what all our recent wet weather means for berry fields. More from the owner of a Haskell orchard on how bumper their berry picking crop looks like so far. Stay tuned for that conversation coming up first. And good morning to the folks watching on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream, and of course as well the folks who are watching on CBC television. Bradley is our streaming producer today. Heather Wells is in our CBC Winnipeg local news desk, or there at least, with a look at news headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it's important people notify authorities if they see children and teens potentially being exploited. Yesterday, RCMP announced charges against a woman and 6 men in connection with the sexual exploitation and trafficking of at least 2 15-year-old girls in Portage-la Prairie. Police say someone notified Portage RCMP in February about a young girl being seen in Portage with older men. We'll hear more coming up. And more than 100 people waved Ukrainian flags and sang during a rally in downtown Winnipeg last night. Russian airstrikes this week killed at least 44 people across Ukraine, including 4 children at a children's hospital in Kyiv. Alla Zhurzheva worked at that hospital before coming to Winnipeg 9 months ago, and she knew one of the doctors who died in the attack. We're going to hear from her coming up in our next news at 6:30.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're at 12 minutes after 6 o'clock. Abby Adiyemi has the hot news in the weather.
Yeah, you talk about hot. We will get there. Currently, we are at 18 degrees in the city. It's clear outside. We're expecting sunny skies throughout the day with a hazy outlook. We will be warming up to 29 degrees, though it's going to feel hotter than that with the humidity. It might be feeling like more than 30. We're going to be in the range of 30s all the way to 33. Now there's a heat warning in effect for parts of northern Manitoba. And that will be affecting areas all the way from Norway House, Cross Lake, Woboden Island Lake, Oxford House, God's Lake, all the way down to a Snow Lake. And we're hearing that the daytime highs will be getting over 30 degrees and overnight lows will be around 16, which will stay till like Thursday. And this temperature will begin to get cooler as we get to the end of the week. Now, we also are advising for folks in the north, you need to drink plenty of water even before feeling thirsty, and just to reduce that risk of dehydration. And I would always advise people limit direct sun exposure by, maybe wearing something comfortable, a hat, come with an umbrella, and don't leave pets in the car, because if you go shopping, not just for the northern part of the province, I've gone to grocery stores in the city and I see people leaving pets in the car. It is not the best. So don't leave your pets in the car this season. Tonight's outlook in Winnipeg, it's going to be clear. We're going to see temperatures dipping to 18, and then tomorrow we anticipate more sunny conditions. Right now in Winnipeg, it's 18 degrees. We will see more of sunny conditions with some hazy day around us, and we'll be warming up to 29 degrees.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiyemi there. Corey Funk, good morning.
Good morning to you. It's commute-wise looking pretty smooth out there so far. We're definitely in the July traffic doldrums right now. But if, there's still lots of construction out there. We've still had a few stalled cars. So if you do see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line and let folks know what you're seeing. The number 204-788-3093.
15 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Faith Fundal. If you're looking for a delicious family activity, have you ever thought about picking Haskap berries? They're a cross between blueberries and grapes and have their own distinct taste and texture. Trina Zacharias co-owns Haskap Prairie Orchards in West St. Paul and joins us on the line now. Actually, will join us on the line in just a moment here. I think the phone line just disconnected there. I bet you also might be having some berries in your breakfast. You'll have to let us know if you've tried Haskap berries and what you think of them. 204-788-3205. 204-788-3205 is our listener line. The first time I tried Haskap was actually not in jam form. It was actually in a wine, which tasted pretty good. We're going to talk about how the Haskap U-Pick crop is doing this year. So that's happening this half hour. Actually happening right now. Trina Zacharias co-owns Haskap Prairie Orchards in West St. Paul. Trina, I think we got you on the line now. Good morning.
Good morning.
What has your berry season looked like so far? How would you describe it?
Well, it's been a very different year, actually. From the very first time we planted these berries in 2020, it's been quite a bit of drought and very little rain. So now all of a sudden to get this deluge of rain, it's created different problems in terms of we're having to pump water off, trying to get on the field to get work done. So been a few issues.
Were you expecting that kind of thing because of how it's been the past first few years?
Well, never expected that much rain. We always wanted it to eventually start raining so we didn't have to water the plants.
Mm-hmm.
But the other problem was that it affected pollination because the bees would come out to pollinate once the plants bloomed.
And then they'd just be washed away.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they would just be washed away, essentially.
Well, the bees would go back into their nest, and they would stay there for 3 days because waiting for this weather to subside. And so we had really staggered ripening of our berries this year. So it was an odd year.
So with the staggered ripening, do you have enough for people to pick?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've been open for about a week and a half already with people coming out to pick, and we're open today as well. I think we'll be finished by this weekend.
That quick, huh?
Yeah.
What sorts of berries do people pick there? I mean, Haskap is one of them. Are there other berries that people can pick at your orchards?
No, we just have Haskap berries, but we do have 5 varieties of Haskap.
Okay, so let's talk about those different varieties there, because for some people who may not have tried Haskap, how do they taste? How would you describe how each of those varieties taste?
Well, they all have the similar taste of a blueberry crossed with a raspberry. So a really nice, sweet, and tart flavor at the same time. They all have just different nuances between the 5 varieties. 4 varieties are sweet, for sure, right off of the shrub. Honeybee variety is just a slight bit tartness to it because I wanted some people like tart.
So you're expecting to be done by this weekend. What's your advice to folks who are thinking, oh, I need to go there quick? Haven't gotten my Haskap berries yet.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and it's Haskap Prairie Orchards. And I post daily what our hours would be because we are just so under the influence of what happens with the weather. So things could change at any given moment. So I encourage anybody coming out to check the page for any updates or to call or text for an appointment.
Appreciate your time today. Thanks, Trina, and take good care.
Okay, thanks so much.
Trina Zacharias co-owns the Haskap Prairie Orchards in West St. Paul. They do post what days they're open on their Facebook and Instagram pages.
School is out. Time to sleep in, ride your bike, summer camp. Remember that feeling? Fort White Alive wants to bring it back with The Great Escape, a one-night adult summer camp. Hike the trails, hop in a canoe, and play all kinds of games at CBC's tent. Plus, a dance party hosted by DJ K. Chetta and your choice of adult bevy. The Great Escape, July 25th at Fort White Alive. Proudly sponsored by CBC.
20 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And still to come, Interpol says Canada has made the top 10 worst list of countries with car theft. We'll get into how that might be affecting consumers' purchase decisions and as well what it means for insurance claims. That's coming up here on the program soon. First, though, handing your child a smartphone or tablet might seem like a good way to stop a tantrum in its tracks. But a recent study in the journal Frontiers in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry found that excess screen time can lead to kids with poor emotional regulation skills down the road. Laura Kavanagh is a registered psychotherapist and professor of behavioral sciences at Seneca College. She is in Bracebridge, Ontario. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Faith. Thanks for having me.
I know you weren't involved in this study, but can you break down what these researchers found about young children and screen time? What's the Coles notes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is something that psychologists have had their eyes on for a while, especially since, the advent of the iPhone and the iPad. But it's such a complicated phenomenon that it's really hard to tease apart. And I think this study is very interesting because it looks at one sort of particular aspect. And what it shows is that it's complex. So children who engage in more screen time have poor emotional regulation skills, and there's kind of a dose-dependent effect, meaning the more time you're on screen, the more evident it is that there's an impairment. So emotional regulation skills are those skills that help us to calm ourselves down, to soothe ourselves, to not act on our first sort of wave of emotion.
It's sort of that second, not voice, but the second thing in your brain that says, you're angry,
Yeah.
Don't throw things around.
Yeah, don't punch, Yeah, exactly. But what's interesting, too, is that parents of kids that at baseline, at the beginning, were more difficult to regulate, more difficult to soothe, had more challenges with anger control, those parents were more likely to give their child a screen as a digital pacifier. So what you can see is that we're setting up this kind of vicious cycle where the kids that are more difficult to soothe, that have greater anger control issues, are getting more screen time because their parents are using it to calm them down in the moment, which works. But over the long term, it's impairing their self-regulation skills more and more over time.
That's interesting. The part of the parents needing to do that. Did it talk at all about what factors were at play that made parents have to do that, or essentially start giving the iPad or the phone or whatever that screen is more often?
Well, I think the thing is that people do it because it works.
Right.
So, these are it's not just something that kids like, right? Like these are really designed, these devices, these games, these apps, interfaces are designed to really kind of hijack your dopamine system. So it's not just, this is something a lot of kids are into. It's like, this is designed persuasively. This is designed to keep you clicking, to keep you staring, to keep you fascinated, to make it hard to put down. And the dopamine system in our brain is it's the pleasure system, but it's also the desire system. So the more you enjoy it, the more you want. It's that system. You don't ever really feel satisfied, right? And what's interesting is we know now that that's actually how addiction works, although different substances may have different direct effects on the brain. All addictive substances and addictive behaviors, including gambling, but also, screen time, affect the dopamine system. And when the dopamine system gets hijacked like that, it has a pretty significant effect on our brain. And that's why now we view addiction as more of a chronic disease than just like a physiological dependence, because that whole system, the mesolimbic dopamine system, is connected to all different kinds of the parts of the brain that have different functions. And one of the areas that it's connected to is the prefrontal cortex, and that helps with emotional regulation, inhibition, anger control, rational decision making. And so it's kind of like when we're getting screens at a young age, it's kind of like plugging a laptop into an outlet that has power surges. So you're getting these big surges that are blasting the brain. And then the brain is compensating by making itself less reactive to dopamine overall. It's producing lower dopamine receptors. It's not producing as much baseline dopamine. So you need more and more and more from this outside source. And that's true with screens too, right? Like Mario Kart, the kid might go for Mario Kart. No, that's not enough. Now I need Fortnite. Now Fortnite's not enough. Now I need Call of Duty. Now I need Grand Theft Auto, right? They need to keep upping the ante. And because the brain is lowering its own dopamine reactivity and response, the parts of the brain that are attached to the dopamine system, the limbic dopamine system, start to have lower levels of activity when the person is not engaged with, in this case, the screen or whatever their substance or behavior of concern is.
I feel like we've been talking about this for so long, particularly since the end of the pandemic, Laura.
Yes.
Is the new thing now connecting how the screen impacts the brain? Because you were talking about addiction as well, though that function is similar, right? Is that what's new now that in the healthcare industry that they're seeing and that they're concerned about?
100%. Like, it's different than when you and I watched cartoons as children, right? Because like these are designed in ways that are really, really powerful and are causing that dopamine blast. And unlike an adult who develops an addiction, over time, someone's brain can return to heal and return to baseline. But for kids, this is when their brain is getting wired. Like this is what their baseline will be, right? And so it's really a lot more significant at that age. I mean, it's significant at any age, but it's more significant at that age because it's not so much of a learning that you have as an adult that you need to unwire, but this is how your brain is being wired permanently. Or at least initially, right? And that becomes harder and harder to change as you get older. And it's really not a fair fight between all the energy that's being pulled into and a 4-year-old. So it really is up to the parents to, try to set some limits on it. Although I think it's important also to say that, I get that. I'm a parent myself, and guilt and shame doesn't help. And I don't think it's realistic to expect to have no screen time for a child in 2024.
I expect we'll hear more about how healthcare professionals, doctors, psychotherapists will be able to help. But what about parents? We just have a minute or so left here. What do you suggest parents do? But in particular, because of that context of that guilt, right? What do parents do, especially when their kid is in tantrum mode?
Yeah. So, I think the thing is that the one thing that can compete with screens at that age, this may not be true once your kids are teens, is actually you. So kids really at that age, they crave attention, affection, movement, and touch. That's what they want. And so when you give your child your full attention, when you are engaging with them, when you're dancing with them, moving with them, that is something that can compete with the screen for a preschooler. And so one of the best interventions that we can do, rather than getting locked into power battles with our child over okay, the timer went, you have to put it away, is to really just spend less time on our own screens, which is very challenging for us too. So just imagine how challenging it is for a 4-year-old. And then organically you end up interacting with each other more. The other thing I would say, is these mobile screens are really tough because kids can carry them everywhere. It might be worth, hitting up a Goodwill or Facebook Marketplace and investing in a DVD player, which you can get.
I remember those.
Yeah, because then there's an end point. The movie ends and it's done, as opposed to a streaming service, which is constantly suggesting the next episode.
It keeps going and going. Laura, that's all the time 100%. We have. Speaking of being done, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you, and have a good morning.
Great to talk to you too. Have a good day, Faith.
Thanks very much. Laura Kavanaugh, registered psychotherapist and professor of behavioral sciences at Seneca College. She is in Bracebridge, Ontario this morning. We're at 29 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, on CBC Television, and hello as well to the folks who are streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. I'm Faith Fundal sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. We are expecting a temperature high of 29. We'll give you a full look at your weather forecast, including all those heat warnings. We'll also talk about how much it costs to rent an apartment across the country. It is still going up, but the increases are getting smaller. Stay tuned for that. We'll head to your CBC National Business Desk. We'll also have a conversation about how Interpol says Canada has made the top 10 worst list of countries with car theft. There are a whole bunch of implications because of that statistic. That conversation after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's hazy already out there. We're at 18 in downtown Winnipeg, headed to a high of 29 this afternoon. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it's not just men who are accused of sexual exploitation. RCMP have announced charges against a woman and 6 men in connection with an exploitation and trafficking case in Portage la Prairie. Police allege the woman lured 2 15-year-old girls into performing sexual acts on men in exchange for drugs and money. Stephen Sauer is the director of cybertip.ca, a tip line that is part of the Centre for Child Protection.
There are more males that we see coming through the tip line that are reported in terms of the offender side of things or the alleged offender side of things. But we definitely do have females being reported as instigators in these types of crimes as well.
The woman has been charged with multiple counts of child luring and trafficking. The men are charged with offenses including sexual interference and making child pornography. RCMP said they are looking to identify a third girl who they believe was also exploited. Calling attention to the latest attacks in Ukraine. More than 100 people gathered in downtown Winnipeg last night. Russian airstrikes killed at least 44 people on Monday, among them 4 children and 2 people at the Children's Hospital in Kyiv. Alla Zhurzhva was a pediatric anesthesiologist there before coming to Winnipeg 9 months ago.
One doctor was killed yesterday. She worked in this department. She was, it was the amazing doctor. She was the nephrologist.
The hospital's director confirms to reporters one of its doctors was killed and its dialysis building was destroyed. Vacant building owners in Winnipeg could face tougher standards for boarding up their properties. The Executive Policy Committee has passed a motion from Mayor Scott Gillingham. It would apply the city's strictest boarding rules to all vacant buildings. Gillingham says vacant buildings pose a risk to city staff and to emergency responders.
I want to see these properties converted into residential development. And so we are trying to use a series of incentives and a series of deterrents to get people to deal with their property, to not sit on vacant and derelict property.
The mayor's motion would also raise fees property owners would have to pay for vacant building inspections. The changes still need approval of council as a whole. The Hudson's Bay store at Winnipeg's CF Polo Park Mall was closed yesterday. A sign on the door says the closure was due to scheduled maintenance. A spokesperson for the retail chain blames the closure on heat wave-induced stress on the store's cooling and ventilation systems. At least 4 other Bay stores in Canada are closed for that same reason. 3 are in BC, 1 is in Ontario. Hudson's Bay says the closures are temporary. A second Bay store in Winnipeg at St. Vital Centre remains open. An unlicensed massage therapist accused of sexually assaulting women at his home in rural Manitoba has been found not guilty. Bernhard Unger was on trial earlier this year on 4 counts of sexual assault. 4 women alleging he touched them inappropriately for a sexual purpose during massages in Blumenort in 2022. Unger testified on his own behalf during the trial and said any inappropriate touching was not on purpose. A judge ruled while he found the women who testified sincere, he thought it was just as likely the touching during the massages was inadvertent. Well, a tough loss for Canadian soccer fans last night. Argentina beat Canada in a semifinal match at the Copa America tournament. The final score, 2-0. Those are just some of the Canadian fans who traveled to East Rutherford, New Jersey to watch the game. Despite the result on the field, Canada made history by making the semifinal match. Regarded as the biggest game Canada's men's soccer has ever played outside the World Cup, Canadian soccer fans reacted after the match was done.
Disappointed, but also just being here was a big win. It's amazing that they made it this far. It was just so exciting to come down and watch them play, and they look like they belong with the best team in the world, so that's pretty amazing.
The fact that they only lost 2-0 is honestly pretty impressive. It could have been worse.
Fantastic game for sure. We had a great time. It's Argentina as the best team in the world, but the Canadians did really, really well, so we're really proud of them.
Canada's not finished with the action. Canada plays for third place on Saturday. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Sounded like a very fun party, Heather.
No kidding.
Yeah. I did not stay up to watch because I was scared that we might lose. So I didn't want to go to bed sad.
Do you know what? I watched the first half and then I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep thinking about what's happening in the game.
Oh. And then, of course, it's still a big deal. So I think a lot of fans are still okay with the results. So.
Yeah, we had some good looks in the first half. What I saw, it wasn't horrible. It was all right.
I think so too. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Just about 36 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. We'll talk about a whole bunch of things, including rent increases. They are continuing to go up for apartments right across the country. Stay tuned for that conversation. First, though, Abby Adiemi's got to talk about the hot weather. In fact, remember you were saying we would eventually get heat warnings?
Yeah, I said we will. It's going to touch the northern part of the province today, and then we should be expecting the rest of the province to start seeing it from tomorrow, because whatever affects them there, it's going to blow down here in due time. Though it's still humid around the southern part of the province. 18 degrees in the city. Clear skies. We'll see some sunny appearance in a few minutes. Okay, it's going to be we're going to see the sun do its thing. Some hazy conditions would come with that. We will warm up to 29, though it's going to feel like 33 with the humidity. And then we'll see some clear night, and we will try to cool down to 18, though the sunny condition and that hazy condition starts again tomorrow, warming us up to 32 degrees. Heading west to Brandon, currently 14 degrees and mainly sunny at this time. The sunny condition will stay with you for the most of the day, and then you will be climbing to a high of 29, though it's going to feel hotter than that. Up north, we have that heat warning for northern Manitoba impacting Norway House, Cross Lake, Wabodin, Clearwater Lake, the Provincial Park, Flim Flong, all the way down to Snow Lake, and we'll be seeing daytime highs in the regions reaching 30 degrees, and it's going to feel hotter than that, so you might want to take care. Currently, Thompson is at 13, mainly sunny. We're seeing that sunny condition. We'll see some clouds later, and then we'll warm up to 29 for folks in Thompson. Churchill is currently at 16 degrees, heading to a high of 25. Dauphin is at 16 also, sunny at the moment. We're seeing some mist, and then we'll see some sunny conditions with hazy conditions to go with that. High of 29 also. Gimli at 15, heading to a high of 29 for the Interlake region. You'll see a sunny day today. Steinbach at 13, and Clare also some sunny conditions in the forecast, a high of 29, and Morris at 14. Clear day, clear start. The Pembina Valley region will be seeing sunny with haze, and of course warming up to 29, though it's going to feel hotter than that. It's going to be in the range of 30 to 33. For Winnipeg, right now we are at 18 degrees. It's going to be a sunny one, a hazy day with a daytime high of 29 with a humidex of 33. And don't forget about the heat warning for northern Manitoba, as temperatures will be getting to the range of 30s.
It's going to be hot for sure. All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi there, our technical producer. Corey Funk has been following the commute. Not as hot as the weather.
No, not as hot as the weather right now. Pretty quiet overall, but I will say that the Norwood Bridge might be an issue for folks. Just a reminder, if you haven't driven over it yet in the past 3 days or so, there's some construction that just started that's expected to last until September 24th, and it's got a bunch of lanes closed, both northbound and southbound, and that's causing, as you can imagine, some pretty big backups. heard from Don yesterday, it was backed up all the way to Assiniboine. So just maybe if you have another way to get over the river, I know it's not super easy to do that. You might want to find another way because it does get pretty backed up, especially during the rush hour. But if you see something else going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. Let me know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Corey Funker, studio director here on the program. Good morning to the folks streaming us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Hello as well to the folks watching on CBC television. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer this morning. Phil Demott is at the CBC National Business Desk. Hello as well.
Hi, Faith.
Renting an apartment across the country, the numbers are still going up, the costs, but apparently increases are getting smaller. And I guess good news, or how would you characterize it?
I mean, it's better than going up like a rocket. It still costs you a ton to rent an apartment in Canada, but the rate at which those rents are going up is slowing, and it actually dropped in June. That's according to the monthly rent report put out by Rentals.ca and Urbanation. They do this every month. In June, the average Canadian rent across all types of properties, $2,185. That's an increase of 7% compared to last June, but that's the smallest increase in more than a year. And if you look at May, compared to May, the June price actually fell 0.8%. One problem with these numbers, it counts 1, 2 bedrooms and condos. Condos were the group with the slowest rent rise, about 2.5%. Meanwhile, rents for 1 bedroom places up 7.7% a year over year. Top of the list, because I'm looking at 2 bedroom apartments, is Vancouver, not surprisingly, $3,648. In Winnipeg, it was $1,839 for a 2-bedroom. That's only the 28th highest dollar rent in the country. They kind of do it that way. So, in relative terms, it's not bad. What the problem is the rate of increase. So compared to last year, the price, that 2-bedroom price, up 11%. It's up 4% compared to May. The city with the highest increase year over year is Saskatoon at 17%. Faith, the report doesn't go into reasons why the rents are slowing, but when I look at the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation numbers, in May, the starts for multi-unit buildings were up 13%. Kind of indicates that maybe more rental properties are coming online as opposed to single-person houses. Because when we talk about all this trouble with the market, the housing market, we're kind of pushing together what people rent along with what they buy. So you talk about single-family homes, but what we're talking about here is rents.
I know there's this new poll that suggests immigrants are considering leaving because of unaffordable housing. One housing advocate blames systemic racism. We're going to hear from a Winnipeg landlord spokesperson who disagrees and thinks there is more context. So that's coming up in our next half hour. Let's talk about Maple Leaf Foods here. Apparently it plans to sell off its pork business. What's going on here?
Yeah, this is an effort to dump an underperforming part of the company. This week, Maple Leaf Foods said it plans to package up its pork assets and sell the new company on the stock exchange. Deal's known as a spin-off, and it basically means pork is on its own. Maple Leaf's other meat and plant-based protein businesses, they'll stay around, and it's a separate company. So you're getting 2 companies out of this.
Right.
Generally, a big company spins off a division because that portion of the company's underperforming. And by getting rid of that part, then the analysts look at the remainder and they say, well, that's pretty good. It's probably the case with Maple Leaf because pork has been underperforming, had tough times in recent years. U.S. consumption down 4%. Canadian consumption down 11% over the past decade or so. Worldwide, because a lot of pork consumption goes on in Asia, down 7%, and it's even worse when you consider hog prices. Those prices were down 13% in 2023, and costs, especially feed corn, up 50% since 2019. So when investors were looking at Maple Leaf, they would see a strong meat and plant-based business being dragged down by a flagging pork arm. Spinning that division off means that the remaining part of the company, the value of it, especially in the stock exchange, should go up.
We'll follow that story as well because I know Maple Leafs is here in Manitoba. Before you go, what summer camp do you take a jet to?
Summer Camp for Billionaires sounds like a Porky's kind of movie or a horror movie, depending on the title. But it's actually a real thing. This week, tiny town of Sun Valley, Idaho, hosting a retreat for billionaires, CEOs, and political types. So guys like Bob Iger out of Disney and Tim Cook out of Apple. This week, the Kashmir pullover crowd gets together to discuss whatever it is billionaires discuss. The agenda is secret, but not the arrivals. More than 165 jets, possibly as many as 300, will be landing this week at that town's tiny airport. They might have problem parking the jets because it usually handles about 40 flights a day.
Wow.
But the Gab Fest has been going on 40 years, 4 decades. But before you think all they do is sit around drinking $4 coffee, because apparently one attendee complained about the price of coffee one time, big deals actually get done at this conference. 94-year-old billionaire Warren Buffett, I think he's really clever, refers to it as ABWA, acquisitions by walking around. They literally go around and chat. Well, Bob, do you want to say, oh, yeah, okay, here, and you shake hands and off you go. But they're not going to be stuck in bunk beds and unheated cabins, unlike my camp experience. The bank that runs this used to hand out Patagonia puffy vests.
What?
No word on what this year's camp T-shirt will be, but I have a feeling it's not going to be, Rumble in the Jungle kind of T-shirts,
That airport is probably happy with all its landing and takeoff fees. What is it today, Wednesday? The Wednesday markets, how are the numbers so far this morning?
Pretty reasonable. Europe, positive so far. Germany, France, UK up close to 0.75%. The Nikkei in Japan continues on fire, up 0.5%. Oil down 15 cents, $81.26 a barrel. Canadian dollar flat, 73.32 cents US.
Phil, always good to have you. Take good care and talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Faith.
It's Phil Dumont at the CBC National Business Desk. 15 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. We're going to talk about car theft and how Canada has made it to the top 10 worst countries in Interpol's stolen vehicle database. First, though, Camila Cabello's new album, CXOXO, sees her sharpening her skills as a songwriter and taking some musical chances that fans might find surprising. What might not be as surprising is that when she asked Drake for some feedback while making her album, he offered to collaborate with her. The result is the song Hot Uptown. And as she told Q's Tom Power, it all came from sliding into Drake's DMs.
I DM'd him and I was like, been listening to you a lot throughout this project and throughout the writing of this album. I'd love to play you some of the music that I have. Just like, pick your brain, ask you what you think. And I'd actually met him before, which I don't think he remembers, but like when Havana was popping, I saw him at a party and he was like, I love what you're doing. I can't wait to see like what the next chapter holds for you. And I just remember walking away that night being like, oh my God, Drake is like, I listen to his music so much and he is just so kind and sweet for saying that. So I really was like, I'd love to like hear what you think. And he was like, I'd love to hear it. And and then we like met up for Dins, little Miami Dins vibe. And I played him songs from my album and he gave me the feedback. He was like, me like.
Is that Borat?
Yes.
I just didn't have Camila Cabello doing Borat on my life bingo card, but I'm so happy it's there.
I say that more often than I would like to admit. And he actually did not say that. He did not say, me like. That would have been so incredible. And I would be like, never leave my side, actually. All right. So then he was like, I want to see if there's any like ideas I have, like, because I want to contribute to your project. And I was like, well, contribute right on over. That would be so fun. And he sent me the idea for Hot Uptown. And I was all like, I don't think you're ready for a love like mine. And I like wrote my parts and then I sent them to him. He was like, hard in all caps. And so now we're best friends.
You can hear Tom Power's full conversation with Camila Cabello on Q wherever you get your podcasts. This is the track featuring Drake. This is Camila Cabello with Hot Uptown.
Yeah. Nike me shoemaker. Benz on me car maker. Tiffany me ring maker. Let me grip by your money maker. Okay. Grip by your money maker. Okay. Outline I go bling later. Okay. Trust me, we are link later.
Time
Trying something else might even work in your favor. Trying to forget me doesn't work when he's basic. Trying one more time cause we look so good on paper. Trying me. I don't think you're ready for love like mine. I don't think you're worthy of my time. You know Pisces low-key the best time. Lucky man who hits me in my prime. Yeah, when it's hard uptown, you can miss my love. Trying to calm me down, couldn't make this up. Hard uptown, do you miss my love? Do you want me back? 2 hands on my waist, 1 hand on your face. You're too weak to handle me, my babe. You should play it safe. Please know that you're making a mistake. Giving me my space. You better hang on to me this time. You better. Rolex me, watch me go. Oh, Benz on me, car me go. Oh, Tiffany me ring me go. Okay, let me grip on your money maker. Okay, grip on your money maker. Okay, that line I go bling later. Trust me, we a link later. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talk.
That's Camila Cabello and Drake with Hot Uptown. We're at just before 9 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. We're going to talk more about housing in our next half hour of the program. First, though, Canada is swiftly becoming one of the car theft capitals of the world. Since the RCMP began sharing data with the international police agency Interpol in February, forces worldwide have over 1,500 stolen vehicles that they can trace back right here to Canada, putting us in the top 10 countries globally for this kind of crime. George Eny is director of the Automobile Protection Association, joining us from California. Hi, George.
Good morning.
Why is Canada now in the top 10 worst countries for car theft?
Well, there's 3 factors. So a lack of coordination between the police and the ports by which vehicles exit the country internationally, and underinvestment by the ports in monitoring what leaves Canada. So that's number 1. Number 2, cars are easy to steal. The car makers have long argued that they shouldn't be made responsible for the social costs of automobiles. You know, they did this with air pollution in the 1970s, 60s. With vehicle safety, you know, for years they argued that car injuries were due to the nut behind the wheel and not the actual design of cars. They couldn't be really held responsible. And so roughly the conversation around car theft when you speak to the automaker trade groups is where they were on those issues in the 1970s. So for them today, $20 a car would be a huge expenditure to make a car harder to steal. And they object to standards that would impose that on them. And finally, the third reason is that thieves have become more professional. They work internationally. It's not just a local guy working with a crooked recycler and owning a chop shop. So the auto theft itself is more professionalized.
So you mentioned those 3 things. I want to talk about the port issue here. Where are stolen cars in Canada? Where do they typically end up?
So the kind of theft we're looking at now is primarily Quebec, Ontario feature, and lower mainland BC. And they end up going through the Port of Montreal, or to a lesser degree, the Port in Vancouver, and they're sent out of the country with phony paperwork in a container described as something else other than a stolen vehicle.
So what do you think, what's your sense of what needs to happen then? I mean, that is what you're describing. Who needs to do what?
Well, history's a good teacher. This is our 3rd big wave of automobile theft crime. And there was one in the 1990s after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when Eastern European markets opened up to Western goods. And suddenly it was possible to steal a car. And people figured out that it was easy to ship it out of Canada because there was no surveillance.
What did they do then? What did they do then in that first wave?
Well, among other things, they made cars harder to steal. In the first and second wave, the second wave was in the early 2000s. Joyriding was out of control. It was young people stealing a car, often just temporarily as a form of transportation, and then dropping it off somewhere, but not without a lot of damage. And that was ended by having an electronic chip in the key, something the car makers had objected to and cost maybe as much as $7 a car, the way the standard was written. So when we're looking, at what the road ahead would involve, it means more investment in the ports, monitoring what's inside the containers, and working carefully, police working carefully with people at the ports. And that's happening now, by the way. There has been a much higher profile. The coordination always leads to results within the first year or two when it comes to auto theft. It's easier to combat than drug crime or weapons importation.
Is it clear to you if there are specific vehicles that's part of this, that where the numbers are increasing?
Clearly, when you look at the list of most popular vehicles for theft, the APA sees a pattern. So it's car makers that make a very desirable product. So a Lexus or Toyota SUV, a Honda SUV, those are vehicles that people want in Canada. They also want them overseas. And the same car makers make the product in a way that is very easy to steal and are derelict when it comes to coming up with solutions for the problem in our market.
George, appreciate your time today. Thank you for making this being available, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take good care.
Bye.
George Eny, Director of the Automobile Protection Association.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
4 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app, on CBC Television as well, and streaming live on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Good morning. Thank you for watching and listening to us here on the program. We're also watching and listening to Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, more than 100 people waved Ukrainian flags and sang during a rally in downtown Winnipeg last night. They were there to bring attention to the latest attacks by Russia, which have killed at least 44 people across Ukraine on Monday, including some children at a children's hospital in Kyiv. Alla Zhirzhva worked at that hospital before coming to Winnipeg 9 months ago, and she knew one of the doctors who died in the attack. An unlicensed massage therapist accused of sexually assaulting women in his home in rural Manitoba has been found not guilty. Bernhard Unger was on trial earlier this year on 4 counts of sexual assault for women alleging he touched them inappropriately during massages in Blumenort in 2022. A judge has ruled while he found the women who testified were sincere, he thought it was just as likely the touching during the massages was inadvertent. We'll hear more in our next local newscast coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Our streaming producer is Brad Lillies, our show director Corey Funk, our tech and music producer Abby Adiyemi. I'm Faith Fundal. Expect it to be another hot day for Winnipeg today. Sunny conditions in the forecast. It'll also be hazy because of some forest fire smoke west of us. Temperature high of 29 degrees with a humidex. It'll feel more like 33. It is going to be hot as well in northern Manitoba. Environment Canada has now issued some heat warnings for several places, including Norway House, the Pas, Flin Flon. We'll keep you up to date as the morning progresses. We'll go through exactly where those heat warnings are. But essentially, if you're going to be going out today, wherever you are in the province, it's going to be hot. So wear that sunscreen and be prepared for that. Still to come on the program, a new poll suggests immigrants are considering leaving because of unaffordable housing. This week, we heard from a housing advocate who blamed systemic racism. Here in Winnipeg, a landlord spokesperson disagrees and thinks there's more context to that. We'll have that conversation coming up in our next half hour. Also, if you want to be a happy camper this summer, Scouts Canada has a new helpline to answer your camping questions. More on what sorts of things they can help you with coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Goodbye to the folks watching on CBC Television. Stay tuned, though, on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. We will continue after World Report. Stay tuned.
on The Current.
And how saved by Crapone! And now Canada will have a chance to win it!
I'm Mark Kelly. It's an exciting month for soccer fans around the world with action from both the Copa America and Euro Cup. We'll talk about Team Canada exceeding all expectations and making a wild run coming up on The Current. The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Child welfare reform is an urgent issue on many First Nations, and what it could look like is being discussed today in Montreal.
We need to make sure that we build on the community values and beliefs, we build on our culture, we build on our language and so forth in order to make things work for our people.
Assembly of First Nation chiefs have been meeting behind closed doors. They're talking about a new offer from the federal government. But as Olivia Stefanovich reports, the exact dollar value of the offer is still unknown.
I don't know what the deal is, right? That's why I'm in the dark.
Cross Lake Band Chief David Muniaz left yesterday's closed-door meeting early as the Assembly of First Nations held private talks about reforming the foster care system that he says were short on details.
We should be part of that, being these are our children, these are our communities, these are our families.
Muniaz, one of several AFN chiefs frustrated with how discussions are going after National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak told the Assembly the federal government proposed a new deal but couldn't say how much it's worth.
While this offer is under settlement privilege, I can tell you today it's a very significant offer, chiefs.
Ottawa previously committed more than $40 billion for First Nations child welfare. Over $20 billion will soon be used to compensate First Nations children and families, but the rest is still under negotiation.
We can't let Canada off the hook.
Judy Wilson is attending the AFN for the Osoyoos Indian Band in BC. She's worked on fixing the First Nations child welfare system for almost 2 decades and says she won't be rushed into accepting just any deal.
There definitely needs to be accountability.
The AFN says it plans to hold a separate meeting for chiefs to vote on Ottawa's new child welfare offer, scheduled to take place in Winnipeg this fall. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Montreal.
This week's NATO summit in Washington is part high-level meeting, part celebration. The military alliance is marking 75 years, but as Murray Brewster tells us, there was an air of political anxiety at the anniversary party last night.
It looked a little like a Broadway musical with lots of flags. NATO's anniversary celebration in the same hall where it all began with the signing of the Washington Treaty 75 years ago. Nations bound together then and now.
The time to stand for freedom and democracy is now. The place is Ukraine.
Soon to be retiring NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, delivering his own brand of a rallying cry. The war in Ukraine defined his tenure, and he says it will define NATO's future. Whether the alliance has another 75 years in it remains to be seen. As NATO was celebrating, U.S. Democrats were debating President Joe Biden's future behind closed doors, weighing whether he should end his re-election campaign. The possible return of former President Donald Trump and his threats not to defend allies hang over this summit. For his part, Biden showed no desire to go anywhere and said he doesn't believe the U.S. will retreat from its leadership role in the alliance or its obligations.
An overwhelming bipartisan majority of Americans understand that NATO makes us all safer.
The summit formally gets underway today, and allies, including the United States, kicked it off by promising to send Ukraine dozens of air defense systems in the coming months, including at least 4 powerful Patriot batteries. This follows a series of deadly Russian missile strikes this week. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Washington.
The U.S. military pier being used to bring aid to Gaza by sea will be permanently dismantled in a few days. It's been moved repeatedly to avoid bad weather. Now officials tell the Associated Press the pier will be back in place today, but just for long enough to move a backlog of humanitarian supplies. After that, it will be taken down forever. The pier has been operational for fewer than 20 days, and it only delivered about as much aid as would be delivered in a single day before the Israel-Hamas war began. Farther south in Gaza, hospital officials say an Israeli airstrike has killed more than 30 people. They had been taking shelter in a school. Israel says it was targeting a member of Hamas. And although it has said it is winding down its military operation in Gaza, Palestinians say they're coming under increasing fire. Tom Perry reports from London.
The images are by now all too familiar. Bodies covered in plastic sheets, parents grieving over lost children, children mourning dead parents. That scene played out again today in southern Gaza after an Israeli airstrike killed Palestinians who were seeking shelter at a school in Abbasan, east of Khan Yunis. We were at the school gates, this witness says. I went out to get things for my children when the strike hit, a huge explosion. People were flying in all directions. The Israel Defense Forces says it was targeting a Hamas militant who took part in the October 7th attack, and that it's reviewing reports civilians were harmed. This attack comes after Israeli forces ordered a mass evacuation of parts of southern Gaza, once again displacing thousands of people. It comes as well as talks toward a ceasefire stutter and start with no resolution and no end to the killing. Tom Perry, CBC News, London.
In northern India, people are carried into the local hospital in Uttar Pradesh. A bus rammed into a milk tanker. At least 18 people are dead. Officials say a bus headed to New Delhi rear-ended the tanker early this morning. Police are investigating the cause of the crash. Colombia is working hard to conserve the Amazon rainforest, and its efforts are paying off. The country's environment ministry says last year deforestation fell to its lowest level in 23 years. That is an improvement from 2017, when deforestation was at a record high. Under Colombia's new leftist government, more sustainable projects have been launched. Surveillance of the Amazon has been stepped up, and farmers are being paid to protect the land. Alberta is reversing its ban on grizzly bear hunting. The species is endangered. New provincial regulations now allow a small group of hunters to shoot and kill grizzlies. There are conditions. Among them, the bears have to be considered a problem. As CBC's Terry Reith tells us, not everyone is on board with the decision.
The incidences are increasing. The population is increasing.
Todd Lowen, Alberta's Minister of Forestry and Parks, says grizzly bears are a big problem in the province. 2 hikers and their dog were killed by a grizzly near Banff last fall. Grizzlies were also blamed for the loss of 22 sheep and lambs on a southern Alberta ranch this spring. Lowen says the province needs to make changes.
It's really about responding to rural Albertans and their concerns.
The new regulation strips away an 18-year prohibition on hunting grizzlies. The government will issue permits based on a lottery system. Hunters will be given a specific date range and region with the objective of killing bears that are causing problems to people and livestock. The plan worries conservationists.
In those cases, the situation needs to be dealt with by the appropriate wildlife official, somebody who is a professional and trained to deal with these circumstances.
Devon Earle, a conservation specialist at the Alberta Wilderness Association, says the changes took her group by surprise.
It should be coming from the researchers and the scientists who are really the best informed on the topic.
Grizzly bears were declared a threatened species in 2010 when they numbered about 700 in Alberta. The province says there are now more than 1,100. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
A joke in an episode of The Simpsons is now becoming a reality.
Come on, people, somebody order the London Symphony Orchestra, possibly while high. Cypress Hill, I'm looking in your direction.
Yeah, we think we did. Do you know Insane in the Brain?
We mostly know classical, but we could give it a shot.
This episode from 1996 has inspired hip-hop group Cypress Hill to team up with the London Symphony Orchestra. The musicians will showcase the group's acclaimed album Black Sunday, featuring this hit, Insane in the Brain. Rappers Be Real, Sundog, and DJ Lord say tonight's performance will likely be one of the biggest moments in the group's history. And they say it's all thanks to the episode of The Simpsons nearly 30 years ago. The concert will be at London's iconic Royal Albert Hall. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. I'm sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. For some swimmers, high levels of E. coli along Albert Beach is putting a damper on summer fun, but that doesn't have to be the case. We'll hear from a microbiologist about why he says there is no need to worry. If you're camping for the first time this summer and you don't have a parent or close family member to help, you do have a friend just a phone call away. More on the Scouts Canada helpline coming up in this hour of the program. First, though, housing availability and not discrimination. Why a Manitoba landlord advocate isn't blaming racism for why more immigrants are looking to leave because of unaffordable housing. We'll have that conversation and the context coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Stay tuned. Eleven minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Hello as well to the folks who are streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Good morning also to Heather Wells at your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Hello.
Good morning. Well, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it's important people notify authorities if they see children and teens potentially being exploited. Yesterday, RCMP announced charges against a woman and 6 men in connection with the sexual exploitation and trafficking of at least 2 teenage girls in Portage la Prairie. Police say someone notified Portage officers in February about a young girl being seen around Portage with older men. Tougher rules could be coming for owners of vacant buildings in Winnipeg. Mayor Scott Gillingham's Inner Circle has approved a motion calling for enhanced standards for boarding up properties. It would also increase fees for vacant building inspections. A community advocate supports the changes but says it still doesn't address the underlying problem of why there are so many empty properties. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Abby Adiemi has been following the forecast because it's going to be another hot day. Hello.
Another hot day it is. We have warmed up to 19 in the city. It's clear at the moment. We're seeing the sun make its appearance. It will be a sunny day and also it will be hazy. We're heading to a high of 29. The temperature will definitely feel more like 33 with that humidity factored in. And if we look at the highs for this time of the year, we're supposed to be in the range of 26, but currently the high for today will be warming up to 29. Now, there's also a heat warning for parts of northern Manitoba, which has been issued for Norway Isles, Cross Lake, all the way down to Snow Lake. And we're hearing that daytime highs will be reaching 30s. So for folks waking up this morning, you have a heat warning for that part of the province, and this will stay with us all through Thursday. So you want to prepare for that. Drink plenty of water, just hydrate yourself, and reduce the risk of exposing yourself to direct sun exposure. But right now, Winnipeg, 19 degrees. That's what we are at the moment. It will be a sunny day, and it's also going to be hazy, and then we will touch the 29 mark, but it's going to be feeling hotter than that for us in the city.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Sabi Adiemi there. Corey Funk has been following the commute. So far, I think it's been quiet, huh?
Yeah, pretty quiet. Actually, the one place where you might see a big lineup to this morning is Birds Hill Park. Got a call from Brad. The campground, I know the headliners don't hit the stage till tomorrow. Main stage doesn't open till tomorrow, but campground opens today, and there are a lot of folks lining up to try to snag that best camp spot right now. So Brad is one of those people in line. Shout out to Brad. He says to honk if you're also listening right now and you're in line. So we'll see if there's a bunch of honking going on in Birds Hill right now. Shout out to everyone there. So maybe a little bit of a line if you're trying to get into Birds Hill Park. And it made me think, if you're in line, you're waiting, or you're just excited about Folk Fest and you have a request, call our listener line 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. And maybe we'll play your song today on the radio to help you pass the time, get you in the mood for a Folk Fest. But other than that, if you do see something going on, if you have another traffic update for me, be like Brad. Give me a call on the CBC commuter line, whether you're walking, biking, driving. Would love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
Fifteen minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Rising rent and overall living costs. It is why Angus Reid says 40% of new immigrants are considering moving to another province or even leaving Canada altogether. Alfred Lamb isn't surprised with the poll results. He is with the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants.
The first question one needs to ask is whether there is systemic discrimination or racism involved in that situation.
Do you have an answer to that question?
And I think in the case of housing, there are real ongoing concerns of racial discrimination, right, by landlords. In the work that we do, we see most affected people such as racialized single mothers, visibly Muslim renters, different forms of name discrimination, and so on. And they may be expressed by refusing a potential tenant or making unfair demands such as asking for 6 months or even a year's rent in advance. So these are some of the issues that we're seeing on a continuing basis.
Now, here in Manitoba, one property management advocate says that broad characterization requires more context. Avram Sharak speaks for the Professional Property Managers Association and is a property manager himself. Avram is in studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith.
Avram, why do you feel like Lamb's characterization isn't entirely fair?
So Lamb is speaking from Ontario, first of all. Rules are very different there. And I think he looks just at who's not in an apartment, not who is. So we have a severe housing shortage across Canada. That means there's a lot more people who want to move in than can, and landlords were in the business of renting. So we look for good tenants. Sometimes there's A-plus tenants and A tenants, and only the A-plus tenants get in. So some of these new immigrants who aren't getting in may just not be the A-plus tenant. If there was an adequate supply of housing, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be the case. As we discussed yesterday when you talked to me, as an example, in my portfolio, I have some tenants thinking we have too many immigrants living in our buildings because we try our hardest not to discriminate. We just look for a good tenant. And also, a lot of property managers in Manitoba, for sure, want to give a chance to the new people. So sometimes they may only be a B-plus renter, but we put them into an A-plus position because we say, well, we know they don't have a credit rating in Canada yet, but let's give them a chance.
So some might see, though, a landlord's refusal to rent to a newcomer as an example of discrimination, perhaps even racism. But why is that not the way you see it?
Perhaps because I'm looking at it from almost 30 years of experience in the field, and also myself being from a minority, not visible. I see times where I sometimes feel it might be racial, but then I use my brain and say it's really not. It's just a question of what is the circumstance? Why is this decision being made? It's not about me and my background. It's about using rentals, since that's what we're talking about, who's got the best credit rating or who has a job in Canada and who doesn't yet. And of course, that looks like you're discriminating against immigrants, but you're just trying to make the decision. You're entrusting these people with an asset worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and 1 month's lost rent means a whole year plus of lost profit.
Right. So it sounds like what you're describing is a symptom of low housing and overrepresentation, perhaps, of immigrants looking to rent.
100% correct. That and some of the stuff that your other guest had said really addresses Ontario. In Manitoba, you can't.
Let's talk about that, because Manitoba is different. How is Manitoba different when you think of Ontario, in terms of some of the things that he said yesterday?
So one thing is
earlier this week, I should say.
Yeah, that's true. One thing you can't do in Manitoba is you can't reset the rent between tenants. So in Ontario, and this is interesting because something that Phil Dumont had to say this morning, but we won't get into that unless we have a second.
Right.
In Ontario, as an example, a suite rents for $1,000. Someone voluntarily moves out. You now price it at $1,500. There's your rent increase, massive rent increase, if you can get it. In Manitoba, if a suite rents for $1,000, you're only allowed to charge the next tenant the same $1,000 unless they left just when the rent increase was allowed. Right now, that would be a 3% rent increase, so you could charge $1,030. So you don't have huge inflation happening in Manitoba from tenant to tenant. You also don't have the ability to ask for even the security deposit from a tenant anymore. They changed that legislation a while ago. It's hurting our industry to some degree. You can't ask for a security deposit until after they're accepted. So there's no I want 6 months rent for you to move in. It's illegal to ask that.
Landlords can apply, though, to the province for a larger increase. I mean, for 2024, it was the guideline was 3%, which included what they're calling the economic adjustment factor of 1.9%. Essentially, it's meant to offset the cost of inflation. Landlords can still apply. Do landlords or in the folks that you represent, do they apply for these things?
In record numbers, because that's inadequate to cover our actual cost increases. Our basket of goods is a little different than the basket of goods that CPI shows. And the guideline, which we fought for almost 20 years to be tied to CPI, is better than what it used to be, where it was arbitrarily decided by government. But again, we're not buying, clothing, fruits, and vegetables. We're buying utilities and repair supplies.
Which is more expensive.
Utilities often go up by more than 3 or 4% at a time. And repair supplies, it really depends. I mean, during COVID, this is a bad example, but it's a good example. A piece of drywall went from $12 to $90 overnight.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what it is now?
It's back down to about $15 to $19 for the same piece of drywall.
I mean, is there a middle ground here? Because we're talking about this, and it's obvious to you and many folks there about when you think about housing availability. Is there a middle ground? How can people apply or find a safe and affordable place to live who are new to Canada? And do you, what space do you envision landlords might be in to address that?
So I always hate to say let's have government help us because government can be a beast in so many ways. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to use the Syrian immigration as an example. You folks had me on. It's quite funny. When it was announced by the government of Canada and asked me if the province had contacted me yet, and I said it's been 12 hours, they haven't, and within 12 hours they did. We worked with the government who helped ensure that the rent was going to get paid for the first year. And our industry let in pretty much every Syrian immigrant without question because
because of that risk that
the risk was gone. The government helped mitigate our risk. So now we weren't saying, are these people employed? What's their credit rating? We simply said, are these people, right? Do they exist? And do we have any idea that they might be bad people? And we had to rely on the fact that the government of Canada wasn't going to let in bad people. So they were all at the top of our list.
Are you confident that government is hearing you?
They're probably listening. I'm not sure they want to get into a program of supporting every single immigrant the same way they did the Syrians. That's too much for them to do.
It's another conversation.
It's a whole other conversation.
Avram, thank you.
Thank you, Faith.
Take good care. Avram Sharak speaks for the Professional Property Managers Association and is himself a property manager.
Whether you're hanging out or out on the move, stay in the know with CBC Listen. The cost of living with Paul Havershrud goes beyond facts and figures.
Real estate is the 800-pound gorilla of Canada's economy.
And What on Earth with Laura Lynch explores the climate change crisis, problems, and solutions.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
The Cost of Living and What on Earth. Available now on CBC Listen.
23 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. If you are camping for the first time this summer and you don't have a parent or close family member to help, fear not. You do have a friend just a phone call away. We'll hear more about the Scouts Canada Helpline. That's coming up in our next half hour of the program. First, though, at just about 24 minutes after 7 o'clock, Benja and Glitter Party has teamed up for a new song celebrating soulmates finding one another. This one's called Two Fishes.
Who do you remind me of? Have I read you in a book, love? Did I watch you in a movie last week?
That is Benja and Glitter Party with a new shared single. It's called Two Fishes. If you're heading to Birds Hill Park, be prepared for some delays as folks start to find their best camping spot. So be aware of that. If you see other issues on your commute, 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. We'll talk more about camping tips and other outdoor tips in our next half hour as well, so stay tuned for that. First, though, at just about 27 minutes after 7 o'clock, Paul McGowan is in for Scott Regier from your CBC National Sports Desk. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Faith.
Pretty difficult news for Canadians last night. What happened with our game against Argentina?
Well, Argentina showed why they're the top-ranked team in this tournament. Precision passing, an ability to find another gear when it mattered, and then also something that Canadian coach Jesse Marsh pointed out, just depth. Argentina able to rotate players in over the course of this tournament, rest its stars, and those stars factored into the result last night. Julian Alvarez, Lionel Messi scoring the Argentina goals to secure a 2-0 victory. It puts Canada in the unenviable position of playing for third place, but Coach Marsh says they will not take the opportunity for granted.
I always think it's a little bit odd to have the third place match. Fans aren't really that interested and teams are disappointed to play in that match. But for us, it's important because it's an opportunity to continue to work on some things. I took this job 7 weeks ago. I couldn't have imagined that I'd be right here right now, right? So I'm really happy with the team and really happy with the progress.
Yeah, important to remember that all of the talk coming into this tournament was not about making a semifinal. It was just about preparing for top competition ahead of a 2026 World Cup on home soil. So facing one of Uruguay or Colombia and getting another chance to prove that they belong at a tournament like this, no small thing for Canada. That third place game goes on Saturday.
Canada beat the U.S. in that tournament. And tonight there's an Olympic tune-up in basketball against the U.S. as well.
Yeah, an interesting game for a couple of reasons. First, there is recent history between the two teams, Canada beating the U.S. to win bronze at last summer's FIBA World Cup. But that was a U.S. team that was missing Steph Curry, missing LeBron James, and they will be much closer to full power for tonight's game. Canada's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, though, said the team is up for the challenge.
No matter who we play, it'll be very exciting just because we know the opportunity that's coming up. We all love basketball, and we all love the bright lights, the stage. So I think regardless of who it would be, we'd be very excited. We're going to be jittery. I might dribble off my toe in the first possession. You never know what can happen. But once the ball goes up and down the court a couple times, it'll become just basketball, and we'll be doing what we love.
Interesting to hear Shai talk about nerves, because as good as this U.S. team is, Canada's backcourt now consists of Jamal Murray, an NBA champion 2 years ago, and then Gilgeous-Alexander himself, who finished second in MVP voting. Easily the best version of the men's team that we've ever seen, and we get to see how they stack up tonight, a 9:30 start against the U.S.
It's going to be late. Before you go, Wimbledon, there's an update there.
One Canadian left standing, Gabby Dabrowski, and her partner, Erin Routliffe. The two of them won the U.S. Open doubles draw last summer, and Routliffe talked about what makes them such good partners.
The nice thing with me and Gabby is we're always communicating, and we know how we can support each other and how we can still bring the best out of each other. And if one of us is spiraling or something, the other one can kind of bring us back to where we need to be. And I think that's the lucky thing about doubles is in singles, there's no one like directly right beside you that's having the exact same experiences. Where with us, it's like a good, like, hey, snap out of it.
Routliffe and Dabrowski looking to punch their ticket to the semis just after 8:30 this morning.
Have a good morning. Talk to you tomorrow.
Bye, Faith.
It's Paul McGowan from your CBC National Sports Desk. Lots to come in our next half hour of the program after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, a little hazy, a little misty out there right now. It is 19 in downtown Winnipeg. We're headed to 29. The humidex will be 33. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it is important people notify authorities if they see children and teens potentially being exploited. Yesterday, RCMP announced charges against a woman and 6 men in connection with the sexual exploitation and trafficking of at least 2 15-year-old girls in Portage la Prairie. Police say someone notified Portage RCMP in February about a young girl who was seen around Portage with older men. Stephen Sauer at the Centre for Canadian Canadian Child Protection's tip line, cybertip.ca, says it is significant someone reached out to police.
What people need to understand is that child sexual abuse and exploitation is a community issue, and everyone should be involved in highlighting when there are problematic behaviors surrounding youth and children.
RCMP alleged the woman lured the two girls into performing sex acts on men in exchange for drugs and money. Police say they're looking to identify a third girl who they believe was also exploited. Rallying for Ukraine. More than 100 people waving Ukrainian flags, singing during a rally in downtown Winnipeg last night. On Monday, Russian airstrikes killed at least 44 people across Ukraine, including 4 children at Okmadyt Children's Hospital in Kyiv. Alla Zhirjva worked as a pediatric anesthesiologist at that hospital before coming to Winnipeg 9 months ago.
I was so impressed. I was really surprised that a lot of people are here. It's very important for all of us be far from home, but stay in as a Ukrainian community here.
Zhirjva says she knew a nephrologist who died in the attack. The hospital confirms one of its doctors was killed and its dialysis building was destroyed. Tougher rules could be coming for owners of vacant buildings in Winnipeg. Mayor Scott Gillingham's inner circle has approved a motion calling for enhanced standards for boarding up properties. It would also increase fees for vacant building inspections. Cheryl Martins has tracked the number of vacant buildings in the Spence neighborhood. She supports the changes but says it doesn't address the underlying problem of why there are so many empty properties.
There needs to be a new effort to try and encourage either the city or somebody to build on these properties, because the vacant lots are just sort of a reminder that things are going downhill in the neighborhood.
The motion still needs approval from City Council as a whole. The Hudson's Bay store in Winnipeg's CF Polo Park Mall was closed yesterday. A sign on the door saying the closure was due to scheduled maintenance. A spokesperson for the retail chain blames the closure on heat wave-induced stress on the store's cooling and ventilation systems. At least 4 other Bay stores in Canada are closed for the same reason. 3 are in BC, 1 is in Ontario. Hudson's Bay says the closures are temporary. A second Bay store in Winnipeg at St. Vital Centre remains open. Child welfare reforms is an urgent issue on many First Nations, and what it could look like is being discussed today at the AFN in their annual meeting in Montreal. Cross Lake Chief David Monias.
We need to make sure that we build on the community values and beliefs, we build on our culture, we build on our language and so forth in order to make things work for our people.
The Assembly of First Nations chiefs have been meeting behind closed doors. They're talking about a new offer from the federal government, although the exact dollar amount of that offer is still unknown. You can hear more on this story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. An unlicensed massage therapist accused of sexually assaulting women in his home in rural Manitoba has been found not guilty. Bernhard Unger was on trial earlier this year on 4 counts of sexual assault. 4 women alleged he touched them inappropriately for a sexual purpose during massages in Blumenort in 2022. Unger testified on his own behalf during the trial, saying any inappropriate touching was not on purpose. Last month, a judge said while he found the women who testified were sincere, he thought it was just as likely the touching during the massages was inadvertent. And Canada's dream of winning its first Copa America title is over. The men's soccer team lost 2-0 to Argentina last night, thanks to goals by team superstars Lionel Messi and Julian Alvarez.
Fantastic game for sure. We had a great time. I mean, it's Argentina, it's the best team in the world, but the Canadians did really, really well, so we're really proud of them.
First time Canada makes this far in any tournament, I think, so I think it was kind of historic, even though they lost. I think it was worth being here.
We drove all the way down from Toronto to support our team, and I think the boys are just proud. They played a great game.
Now, this was Canada's first time ever at the tournament. Gameplay is not over for Canada, not yet. They will play for 3rd place on Saturday. You can find more news all day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
It's a good reminder. It's not all over.
It's not. They still have one more game.
There's more to come. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're just about 36 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and as well on your CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Good morning. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Abby Adeyemi is our tech and music producer and has been following the weather as well. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Faith. We are warming up, 19 degrees in the city. Sunny with haze reaching a high of 29. That's the forecast for today, though it feels hotter than that. And then we should expect this to stay with us all through the day. This humidity, that's what I mean. Heading west to Brandon, 16 at the moment. You're also enjoying some sunny conditions. These sunny conditions will stay with you, but that will also come with some hazy conditions on the side. The highs will be around 29, also feeling hotter. Moving north to Thompson, currently 15, mainly sunny skies you're getting. Then it's going to turn partly cloudy with a chance of showers or thunderstorm this afternoon. Highs will be near 29. Some breezy conditions will come with that. Now, further north in Churchill, we're seeing light rain at 16 degrees. It's going to be mainly cloudy. Now, that light rain you're seeing might come with some thunderstorm sometime this afternoon because there's still more chance of showers in the afternoon period. And of course, that will be coming with some thunderstorm. Local smoke also possible due to activities from the Alberta end, and we will be seeing a high of 25. Down in Dauphin, 16 and sunny, with some hazy conditions also along with that. We'll get to a high of 29. Gimli's at 15, heading to a high of 29. Steinbach 15, heading to a high of 29 also. And for Morris, also sitting at 15. Sunny conditions for the Pembina Valley region. You're warming up to 29. It's going to feel hotter than that. You'll be feeling like 33 with the humidex. But right now, Winnipeg, currently 19 degrees, heading towards a hazy day with a high of 29.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Abby Adeyemi, our tech and music producer. We're going to stay outdoors for this half hour of the program. If you want to be a happy camper, Scouts Canada has a new helpline to help answer your camping questions. We'll have more on what sorts of things they can help you with still to come. First, though, Corey Funk is helpful to talk about the outdoor commuter situation.
Yes. Yeah, lots of campers waiting in line at Birds Hill Park this morning the campground's opening for Folk Fest today. So there's folks kind of trying to get their best spots. So shout out to those folks. So if you are going to Birds Hill for any other purpose, it might be a bit of a wait for you. So heads up with that. But if you see anything else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number to call, 204-788-3093. All
right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, our studio director here on the program at 21 minutes before 8 o'clock. Now, before you head out to camp in the great outdoors, there may be some things you want to know. But fear not, Scouts Canada wants to help.
Hi, you've reached Scouts Canada's camping helpline, offering quick tips and hacks for the outdoors 24/7.
Whether you're preparing for camp and have questions,
or if you're stuck in a pinch at your site,
don't panic. Seasoned scouts and volunteers are on call to quell your camping calamity. Press 1 for comfortable sleeping tips to avoid cranky mornings. Press 2 for tips on being a considerate camper. Press 3 to find out 5 things a scout won't camp without. Press 4 to learn about preventing wildlife encounters by keeping your site tidy. Press 5 to learn about foods not to take while camping. Press 6 for tips on keeping the bugs away. Press 7 to learn how to avoid poisonous plants and what to do if you experience contact. Press 8 so you know what to do when nature calls. Don't be a crappy camper.
Now, there are 8 things that you heard. There are 8 possibilities. You don't have to remember all of them because Matthew Coe, parent and volunteer scouter with Scout Canada, joining us this morning via Zoom. Hi, Matthew.
Good morning, Faith.
You were smiling, nodding your head as you were listening to that introduction. I mean, what made you start all of this? I think there was a survey back in 2022 and you've continued that.
Yeah, we did a survey in 2022 trying to get a sense of how Canadians were feeling about their own camping abilities as pandemic restrictions were lifting, and we saw that lots of people were looking to get some fresh air after all that time locked down, realizing that maybe people feel a little rusty. So we asked 1,000 Canadians, how do you feel about about your camping abilities.
Were you surprised with the results of the answers to that question?
Yes and no.
What do you mean?
Lots of Canadians felt really, really pretty confident with their camping skills. And I think it kind of plays to that reputation that a lot of Canadians have for being outdoorsy. I mean, we do have lots and lots and lots of, there's lots of Canada, and we like to get out in it. But when it starts to get into the specifics, some things got a little, okay, maybe we want to say something. In this most recent survey, we asked, hey, what would you do if you encountered a black bear while you're at camping?
What did they say?
It is about even split between people who knew the right thing to do and people who knew not the right thing to do.
And I mean, that must be concerning, because I would imagine my threshold would be, we should probably have at least 90% of I know what to do, right?
And that's why we have the helpline. Now, what to do about a bear is not something that's covered in this version of the helpline. It's a fun little tidbit that we had a handful of people that decided, you know what, I'm gonna sing the bear necessities. Bears like that, surely.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing as I listened to those options was how to not be a cranky pants.
Yep.
What are the common mistakes that folks do that might contribute to being a super big cranky pants?
I think really what it comes down to is forgetting to do that little bit of preparation. And that's the other reason that we have this helpline, is we have these little common missteps, these little common things that, maybe you forgot about, so that you can call ahead and kind of get a sense of maybe what you don't realize you don't know, or that you hadn't prepared for. We've got some tips on those 5 key things that you should always have with you whenever you're out in the woods, and even some tips on how to make sure that you're going to have a comfortable night in your sleeping bag.
We are now starting to see heat warnings much across Western Canada and east of us, and now in northern Manitoba today. We will likely get heat warnings in the rest of Manitoba, southern Manitoba, later this week. Does it include as well how to not be so hot when you're outside?
This time around it doesn't, but I'll definitely make a note and pass it along for if we make any adjustments.
I mean, there may be questions that folks don't that you won't be able to answer with the pre-recorded answers. What do you suggest folks do if they go through all the prompts and they go, "Well, you still haven't answered my question"?
Yeah. What I would really suggest in that case is wherever you go out to get your gear, ask the folks there. They tend to be pretty knowledgeable. And if you think you're pretty confident and you're on your way and you see that outfitters just before you get into the camp, give them a chat.
Matthew, your favorite place to go camping in Manitoba? Do you have a spot?
Oh, I would love to get out to Riding Mountain. I find the national parks, the provincial park systems tend to really take care of their facilities and make sure that what you might need is available. One of the tips on the helpline is if you're in the backcountry and you're setting up your camp, setting up your food station, how far away do you want your food from your camp, from where your garbage is? And conveniently, Riding Mountain has that covered for you with the bear-proof containers.
It's always good to bring what you take home, or take home what you bring when you're out camping.
Yep.
Matthew, thank you for making time today, and it's really nice to chat with you. Take good care.
Thanks for having me on.
Matthew Coe is a parent and volunteer scouter with Scout Canada. The helpline is 1-844-SCOUT-101. That's 1-844-SCOUT-101 for Bell Canada users, though it's 1-844-SCOUT-10. That's 1-844-SCOUT-10. Speaking of camping, shout out to the listeners who have lined up at Birds Hill Park today to snag the best camping spot at the Winnipeg Folk Fest campgrounds. Winnipeg's own Ruth Moody kicks off the festival main stage tomorrow night, followed by Lucinda Williams and Shaky Graves. Here's a taste of what folkies are in for tomorrow night. This is Ruth Moody with The Garden.
shine down on me. You know what I need. Shine down on me. Shine down on the garden. Shine down on the garden. Sweet earth, alive under me. You know what I need. Cradle me like a seed as I lay in the garden. As I lay in the wise, beautiful tree, standing high over me. Oh, the things you have seen. Tell me a story in the garden. Tell it to me in the garden. Tell me, how long have we slept? How long have we slept? How long have we wept? There's work to be done. Sky above, so vast and so deep. You know what I need. Rain down on me. Rain down on the garden. Rain down on the garden. Ooh, lights surrounding me. Sweet mystery in everything I see. Come and find me in the garden. Come and find me in the garden. Tell me, how long have we slept? How long have we wept? There's work to be done in the garden. In the garden. In the garden.
Out of Winnipeg, that was Ruth Moody with The Garden. Ruth kicks off the festival main stage tomorrow night at the Winnipeg Folk Fest, at Winnipeg Folk Festival. That starts tomorrow. Still to come here on the program, RCMP in Portage la Prairie have arrested 7 people in connection with the sexual exploitation and trafficking of at least 2 teenage girls. We're going to speak with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection coming up in our next half hour of the program. There's going to be another hot day here in Winnipeg. Sunny conditions, hazy as well. Temperature high of 29. With the humidex, it's going to feel more like 33. We're at 10 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. For some beach goers, it seems it's going to be a little bit harder to beat the heat today. High levels of E. coli are putting a damper on some summer swimming. Albert Beach on the south shore of Traverse Bay has been closed since Friday because of high levels of the bacteria. An advisory sign suggests visitors avoid swallowing lake water and washing hands before handling food. But how did E. coli even get into the water to begin with? Richard Sparling is a microbiology professor at the University of Manitoba, joining us on the line. Hi, Richard.
Hello.
I know you're not surprised about this. How does E. coli get into the lakes? Because this is something that I know many folks are expecting, right?
Unfortunately, yes. The reason why they're there is, well, let's give it a little bit of the backstory. All warm-blooded animals have E. coli in them, we as well. And so as you see along the great beaches, we have a lot of seagulls, and they flock. And when they flock to fish or to eat the food we leave on the beach, they also defecate into the water. And so where there are flocks of seagulls, there will also be seagull doo-doo. And along the warm beaches, because the water is very warm in the shallow areas, the bacteria tend to survive and thrive for a few days. Then the wind may change, and then the water gets diluted, because the water in general in Lake Winnipeg or Lake Manitoba don't have that much E. coli. It's just around certain beaches at certain times.
Right. So when you hear the weather forecast of essentially soon-to-be extreme heat for our parts, what goes through your mind? Are you thinking, okay, the E. coli is not going to go away anytime soon?
It goes away very quickly. I mean, if you look at the website for the government of Manitoba on the quality of beaches, you'll find that, for example, West Grand Beach had an advisory a few days ago. It's been lifted this morning. Most of the beaches in around Lake Manitoba this morning and Lake Winnipeg, I just checked before the interview, are fine. The only outlier today from the samples that they took a couple days ago, Albert Beach stands out as the outlier, unfortunately. So the way the wind blows, the way the seagulls move, because if you have a northern wind, you have rising waters on the south beaches. You have more mixing of the waters with the warm sands. The bacteria are also in the sand. And if it's warm and wet and the seagulls are around, they multiply.
So there are essentially a whole bunch of factors that can lead to having a lot of E. coli or very quickly it going away, like what you're discovering today.
That's correct. That means that the best, it's not, it's a warm day, maybe not go swimming there because there's going to be E. coli. No, check the website. What you will find right now is that most of the beaches in Manitoba are tenfold below the maximum or the minimum for calling beach closure.
When there are closures, which is also expected, what do you suggest to folks? How can they stay safe? Is it as simple as just don't touch the water, don't go in there?
Well, one shouldn't. The idea being that when you reach the threshold of 200 bacteria per 100 ml or 200 fecal coliforms, there is an enhanced probability that someone may get a gastritis, a diarrhea, an intestinal infection. It's an enhanced risk. It's not 100%. If you have 2,000 versus 200 in the sample, that makes a difference. You have to remember, 200 is the threshold. At 160 bacteria, the water is considered safe. So it's up to everyone to decide based on the report and realizing that the report is already 2 days old when it comes out.
So the big question is, should Manitobans be concerned about this?
In general, no. Except at that beach at that time. So in general, go out and swim. If you have concerns, check the website before you leave. If you have an issue with your favorite beach, there are many other beaches on that day that will be fine. So it's not a major concern, but it's an unfortunate nuisance. Make sure you don't feed the gulls inadvertently or officially. Make sure if you have kids in diapers, that the diapers stay clean while they're in the water. If you're digging in the warm sand, make sure that you wash your hands or shower afterwards. And when you're swimming, something I find very difficult to do, don't ingest the water.
Richard, it's always good to chat with you. Thanks for the time today, and take good care.
No problem. Have a good beach day.
We'll
Bye-bye.
try. Richard Sparling, microbiology professor at the University of Manitoba. We're going to head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells is standing by with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, tougher rules could be coming for owners of vacant buildings in Winnipeg. Mayor Scott Gillingham's Inner Circle has approved a motion calling for enhanced standards for boarding up properties. It would also increase fees for vacant building inspections. One community advocate supports the changes, but says it doesn't address the underlying problems of why there are so many empty properties. And more than 100 people waved Ukrainian flags and sang during a rally in downtown Winnipeg last night. They were there to call attention to the latest attacks in Ukraine. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Magandang umaga. Hello, folks streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Corey Funk, our show director, watching the commute. If you see any issues, call our commuter line 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. I know it's pretty busy as you get to Birds Hill Provincial Park because the camping grounds are opening today. I know the shows don't start until tomorrow for the festival, but the campgrounds are opening today and some folks are lining up to get the best spot. Abby Ediemi is our tech and music producer. He'll have more on your forecast for today and for the rest of the week. Stay tuned for that. Also coming up in our next half hour, RCMP in Portage la Prairie have arrested 7 people in connection with the sexual exploitation and trafficking of at least 2 teenage girls. We'll hear from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection coming up here on the program. Stay tuned. World Report is standing by.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Camila Cabello has been a pop star most of her life, starting out in the group Fifth Harmony, then a solo career, that big song Havana, Unana. Camila will tell you about her more experimental new record and how to use the internet when everyone is kinda mean. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Mark Kelly. It's an exciting month for soccer fans around the world with action from both the Copa America and Euro Cup. We'll talk about Team Canada exceeding all expectations and making a wild run coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has a vision for Canada's armed forces, and he's now sharing the idea. In a recent video, Poilievre calls for a cultural shift and increased military spending. The CBC's Catherine Cullen has been asking what it would take to pull that off.
Have a strong military with a warrior culture, not a woke culture.
In a video about his Quebec road trip, Pierre Poilievre reflects on potential changes to Canada's military. The Conservative leader recently told a journalist in BC if he becomes Prime Minister, he'd end what he calls the woke culture. Poilievre's office would not offer specifics about what that means. Defense analyst Dave Perry says some in the military feel there's been too much focus on challenges facing the forces rather than their core function.
There is a bit of a need for a rebalancing in the narrative around our armed forces to have more of a focus on a warrior mentality, because that's needed for the current times.
But Perry says a concentration on core military capabilities means spending on items like fighter jets and tanks. Poilievre's office says that if elected, he, quote, will work towards meeting Canada's NATO spending commitment. The military alliance expects all members to spend 2% of GDP on the armed forces, something Canada hasn't done for decades.
I'll be frank with you. I think the challenge will be less than it was in the last number of years because of the geopolitics of what's happening all around us.
Former Defense Minister Peter MacKay says he believes with wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, amongst other tensions, the public is more open to greater military spending. But Perry says given Poilievre's desire to balance the federal budget, also finding billions needed to reach the NATO target will be tricky. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
NATO leaders are also boosting their military spending on Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden made this announcement at their summit yesterday in Washington.
The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems.
Ukraine is under constant heavy bombardment from Russia, and President Volodymyr Zelensky has been calling for these additional systems. NATO leaders are still working towards a final communique. Child welfare reform is an urgent issue on many First Nations, and what it could look like is being discussed today in Montreal. Assembly of First Nations chiefs are talking about a new offer from the federal government. But as Olivia Stefanovich reports, they still do not have an exact dollar figure.
I don't know what the deal is, right? That's why I'm in the dark.
Cross Lake Band Chief David Muniaz left yesterday's closed-door meeting early as the Assembly of First Nations held private talks about reforming the foster care system that he says were short on details.
We should be part of that, being these are our children, these are our communities, these are our families.
Muniaz, one of several AFN chiefs frustrated with how discussions are going after National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak told the Assembly the federal government proposed a new deal but couldn't say how much it's worth.
While this offer is under settlement privilege, I can tell you today it's a very significant offer, chiefs.
Ottawa previously committed more than $40 billion for First Nations child welfare. Over $20 billion will soon be used to compensate First Nations children and families, but the rest is still under negotiation.
We can't let Canada off the hook.
Judy Wilson is attending the AFN for the Osoyoos Indian Band in BC. She's worked on fixing the First Nations child welfare system for almost 2 decades and says she won't be rushed into accepting just any deal.
There definitely needs to be accountability.
The AFN says it plans to hold a separate meeting for chiefs to vote on Ottawa's new child welfare offer, scheduled to take place in Winnipeg this fall. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Montreal.
Grassy Narrows First Nations is appealing to an international human rights commission for help with its mercury contamination problem. Roughly 1,000 people live there and eat fish from the river. It's been contaminated by decades of industrial activity. About 90% of the population experiences symptoms of mercury poisoning. Grassy Narrows is suing the Ontario and Canadian governments. It wants the contamination to be cleaned up, and it is asking the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to help put pressure on government. The Canadian government has bought an airplane hangar in the north. Some experts say the $9 million investment does not go far enough to protect the Arctic, and they're concerned it is insufficient to compete with infrastructure in China and Russia. Natalie Pressman reports.
The hangar sits next to a NORAD base in Inuvik, Northwest Territories, and Mayor Clarence Wood says he's been lobbying Ottawa to buy it for years.
The government of Canada, I think, became interested when the only offers were coming in from places like China and Russia.
In January, Public Services and Procurement Canada bought the structure for $8.6 million. It had long been leased by the Department of National Defence, but the department canceled the lease in 2021, and the hangar went up for sale in 2022. Owner Les Kapladiak says most buyer interest was out of China and Russia.
Canadians underestimate the value of our assets in general.
DND did not respond to CBC's questions prior to deadline on why it bought the hangar, but Northern leaders say that Canada needs more Arctic infrastructure. Dennis Patterson is the former senator from Nunavut.
Russia is bristling with air bases, military bases, deep sea ports, and we have virtually none on our Arctic coast. So we're completely vulnerable.
Patterson says he's been advocating for Arctic defense infrastructure for decades.
I'm glad it's being finally addressed, but it took a long time and a lot of work to draw that issue to Canada's attention.
The federal government is currently in the process of extending the runway in Inuvik. Once complete, it will be about 2,700 meters in length, making it the longest paved runway in northern Canada. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The remnants of Hurricane Beryl are expected to arrive in parts of Ontario and Quebec today. Rainfall warnings are in effect for southern and eastern Ontario and eastern Quebec. That rain is expected to taper off tomorrow. Beryl is the earliest Atlantic storm to ever reach Category 5 hurricane status. Alberta is reversing its ban on grizzly bear hunting. The species is endangered. New provincial regulations now allow a small group of hunters to shoot and kill grizzlies. There are conditions. Among them, the bears have to be considered a problem. As CBC's Terry Reith tells us, not everyone is on board with the decision.
The incidences are increasing. The population is increasing.
Todd Lowen, Alberta's Minister of Forestry and Parks, says grizzly bears are a big problem in the province. 2 hikers and their dog were killed by a grizzly near Banff last fall. Grizzlies were also blamed for the loss of 22 sheep and lambs on a southern Alberta ranch this spring. Lowen says the province needs to make changes.
It's really about responding to rural Albertans and their concerns.
The new regulation strips away an 18-year prohibition on hunting grizzlies. The government will issue permits based on a lottery system. Hunters will be given a specific date range and region with the objective of killing bears that are causing problems to people and livestock. The plan worries conservationists.
In those cases, the situation needs to be dealt with by the appropriate wildlife official, somebody who is a professional and trained to deal with these circumstances.
Devon Earle, a conservation specialist at the Alberta Wilderness Association, says the changes took her group by surprise.
It should be coming from the researchers and the scientists who are really the best informed on the topic.
Grizzly bears were declared a threatened species in 2010 when they numbered about 700 in Alberta. The province says there are now more than 1,100. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Canada's dream of winning its first Copa American title is over. The men's soccer team lost 2-0 to Argentina thanks to goals by team superstars Lionel Messi and Julian Alvarez.
Fantastic game for sure. We had a great time. I mean, it's Argentina, that's the best team in the world, but the Canadians did really, really well, so we're really proud of them.
First time Canada makes it this far in any tournament, I think, so I think it was kind of historic, even though they lost. I think it was worth being here.
We drove all the way down from Toronto to support our team, and I think the boys did us proud. They played a great game.
More than 80,000 fans filled MetLife Stadium in New Jersey to watch the historic match. It was Canada's first time ever at the tournament. Gameplay is not over, though. Canada's men's team will play for third place on Saturday. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fondal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And good morning as well to the folks who are watching on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillis is our streaming producer. Coming up on the program, from counting cash to tapping cards, why more businesses are just saying no to cash. First, though, the news of 2 teenage girls being exploited and trafficked in Portage la Prairie has raised questions about how we can help keep young people safe. We'll hear from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Eleven minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Heather Wells joining us from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, on the eve of the start of the Winnipeg Folk Festival, harm reduction advocates are asking for some kind of drug testing on site to keep people safe. Arlene Last-Kolb at Moms Stop the Harm says the number of drug-related deaths are on the rise in Manitoba, and drug use at music festivals, she says, is an open secret. We're going to hear more from her. As well, vacant building owners in Winnipeg could face tougher standards for boarding up their properties. The Executive Policy Committee at City Hall has passed a motion from the mayor that would apply the city's strictest boarding rules to all vacant buildings. We're going to hear reaction in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Abby Ediemi has been following the continuing heat, I don't want to say heat wave yet, but there are heat warnings in effect. Hello.
We are warming up. Guess what? It is 20 degrees right now in the city. Throughout the day, we should expect sunny skies with this hazy outlook we are seeing. The temperatures is going to be warming up to 29 degrees, and it's going to feel even hotter than that. There is no rain expected today, and tonight will be clear and hazy. Temperatures will cool down to 18. Now let's go up north. Thompson is at 18, partly cloudy at the moment, while Churchill is at 15. There's also a heat warning for that, parts of northern Manitoba where we have the covering areas from Norway House all the way down to Snow Lake, and we hear that daytime highs will be reaching 30 plus, and this is going to stay with the folks up north through Thursday, and then temperatures will begin to calm down by the end of the week. But for down south, we're seeing temperatures hovering around 19s, and that's what the condition would look like. Sunny skies with hazy conditions, and highs will be touching 29. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 20. We see this condition stay with us, and we're warming up to 29, and it's going to feel hotter than that.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Sabi Adiemi, our tech and music producer. Corey Funk has been following the commute and how busy it's getting at Birds Hill Park.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I know the lineup was big early on, but I imagine as folks kind of slowly file in, set up their tents, it's going to hopefully keep moving. But other than that, that's really been the biggest traffic issue that I've heard of so far this morning as folks go to set up their tents at Folk Fest, which main stage opens tomorrow, but campers are getting started today. But if you do see something else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, would love to hear from you. Give me a call. That number, 204-788-3093.
News of 2 teenage girls being exploited in Portage la Prairie is being described as heartbreaking to the community. Yesterday, RCMP there arrested 7 people in connection to the case, 6 men and 1 woman. They have been charged with 65 offenses between all of them. The men face sexual assault charges, among others. The woman charged with multiple counts of child luring and trafficking. While police knew of 2 young victims, they believe there are more. Stephen Sauer is with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, joining us by Zoom. Hi, Stephen.
Good morning, Faith.
When you heard about this, what did you think?
I'm just devastated for these kids. Unfortunately, there are so many individuals out there who are seeking sexual interactions with children. And, these stories seem to come more and more. We see more of this being reported to the tip line through the online space. And it seems more and more individuals are also seeking kids offline. So just devastated for these youth.
When it comes to this particular charge, luring and trafficking, is it common for women to be the folks who are charged?
Well, we haven't seen that many charges like this in Canada, but certainly there are more and more. We've seen through the media individuals, female individuals who've been charged with some sort of connection to a sexually exploiting youth and children. It's not as common as males, but certainly we're seeing a larger frequency of this happening in this country.
When you look at this particular case, what surprises you the most? What sort of stands out for you?
Well, I think what stands out for us is that, this is emblematic of what we're seeing in the online space as well. We have groups, we have communities of offenders that are seeking youth out together, and they're orchestrating the abuse and exploitation of these kids. And this is really part of the problem is that, the kids, the youth themselves, there's no way to get out of this other than, either disclosing, which is really, really difficult in this space. There are so many reasons why kids don't disclose, but also it also relies on others to recognize that there's some inappropriate behavior happening in this space. And so I think that's kind of key here is that the community members around these youth recognized that there were inappropriate interactions and that there were some boundary breaking activities that were happening between these adult males and these youth.
Is there a difference when you look at rural areas and urban areas when you think about human trafficking and exploitation? I mean, Portage la Prairie isn't a big city.
No, I think the thing that we have to understand is that there is really no demographic for individuals who are sexually interested or sexually motivated to exploit kids and youth. It can happen anywhere in large communities, in small communities, in very small rural communities. The problem is really about access to kids and how these guys gain access to children. And now with the internet and the technology that we have, it's really, really easy for them to gain that access and to continue to have that access, even if it's not in person.
And so because of that, how would you characterize how prevalent human trafficking is, particularly here in Manitoba?
Well, I don't know if I could characterize how prevalent human trafficking is, but certainly in Canada, through the tip line, and this is related particularly to online connected incidents, we receive 2,000 to 3,000 reports a month from the Canadian public related to online child sexual exploitation. And in terms of luring, we've seen significant increases, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, of online luring being reported to the tip line. So in 2023, we reported an 815% increase in luring in the past 5 years. And then we saw another 56% increase this past year in online luring being reported to us. So this crime is not going away. It only seems to be getting worse. And we're seeing that technology is facilitating a lot of this.
And Stephen, in this particular investigation, police say that it started because investigators received a tip that a teen had been seen around town with older men. What signs would you say, would you tell parents or people who are listening, what signs are there that someone might be or is part of a trafficking incident issue?
Well, I think certainly that the fact that these individuals were all around their 40s and interacting with 15-year-old youth, that in and of itself seems, a little bit suspicious, a little bit concerning. Looking for individuals who are ignoring social boundaries or breaking emotional or physical boundaries with youth and children, watching out for individuals who do excessive touching, hugging, tickling, wrestling, any type of contact with youth or children that seems kind of outside the norms of what is socially acceptable, especially if it's not someone who's, necessarily has frequent interaction with that youth. If it's someone outside of their normal home or outside of their normal life, you want to look for those kind of things. And then when you're looking at what's happening for the youth, look at maybe changes in behavior. If there are things that have happened in their life where they, they begin to react really strongly emotionally when you ask about what's going on with their life, what's happening in their online or offline intersections with individuals, looking for maybe that situations where they become more reserved. So anything that kind of triggers that this is not the normal behavior for that youth, you want to look out for those things as well.
What about this particular case as it evolves? Charges have been laid. What about this case? What are you watching for?
Well, I think we're just waiting to see if there are more victims in this case that come forward and that are identified. Certainly, it sounds like there's the possibility for that. RCMP talked about one unidentified individual in this case. There could be more that have just not come forward or that we're not seeing throughout the investigation, which is really unfortunate. And then for the youth themselves, getting the support that they need. I think that's hugely important. So I'm hoping that those that are working with them can get them through this.
Stephen, thank you for making time to talk about this, and take good care.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stephen Sauer with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection and Director of CyberTip.
Hi, I'm Paul Havershrud, host of The Cost of Living, a national business show that looks at everything the world of money touches, which, admittedly, is a lot of stuff.
The Cost of Living. Go beyond the facts and figures and discover the compelling business stories that affect the day-to-day lives of Canadians right across the country. Economics, business, and you. The Cost of Living with host Paul Havershrud. Available now on CBC Listen.
Coming up to 22 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And of course, streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Hello, thanks for listening, watching as well. Handling large wads of bills isn't always a smart move for a business. It is actually faster, more convenient, and more secure to not accept cash, which is why more places are going cashless. But as CBC producer Ellis Cho tells us, not everyone thinks that's fair.
That's 1993.
Almost anywhere you go, you can buy stuff with a flick of your wrist. Coffee, gas, a 60-inch flat screen with surround sound. It's fast, it's easy, and it's the way most Canadians pay these days.
I can't remember the last time I walked with cash on me. It's always, just tap your debit card and just move along.
I never carry cash, so I would be fine with card only. Yeah, I find it easier for sure, especially because you can pay on your phone now too. So I like to do that.
In the last 5 years, the use of cash has dropped by 40%. And in some places, it's dropped by 100%. A growing number of venues in Canada are going cashless, like stadiums, concert halls, and amusement parks. Canada's Wonderland went cashless during the pandemic. Then, they just stuck with it.
When you have thousands and thousands of guests in the park and they're all lining up for lunch at the same time, it's making things faster in our park in terms of those transactions at every point of sale. Those lines are moving quicker.
Grace Peacock is with Canada's Wonderland.
And people's time, is very important to them when they're at a place like Canada's Wonderland. When they want to get on as many roller coasters as they can, we don't want to be holding them up.
Getting rid of cash means people get their burgers faster and take more loops on the Yukon Striker. For the park, it means no more late-night bank runs.
From a business side, we're not having to handle cash on site anymore. That's a big process in needing to account for those other registers at the end of the day. Going contactless makes it easier for us, but also safer too.
And no cash on site means less chance of theft. So is this the beginning of the end of cash? Not so fast. According to a recent Payments Canada survey, more than half of Canadians say they don't want to let go of dough.
I just prefer to pay with cash, to know that money's leaving my hand, and to see that, I feel I can do a better job of keeping track of my finances.
I think it's not a good thing because you should be given the choice to have to pay with cash or card. You should not be forced into doing that.
In parts of the U.S., it's illegal for businesses to refuse cash. Laws have been passed in places like New York City, San Francisco, and some in Canada want to see the same thing here.
Yeah, I took my grandson to watch a Winnipeg Jets game.
Ted Falk is a Conservative MP from Manitoba.
I thought I would buy him a hot dog and a drink, and so we went to a vendor and I presented cash. And then they told me, no, we're completely cashless here. You either have debit or credit, but that's it. I said, really? Well, what if I didn't have that? Well, they said, then you're going hungry.
He recently introduced a private member's bill to make sure cash doesn't disappear. Not all Canadians have access to debit or credit cards. And, he says, there are concerns around privacy.
Every time you make a electronic transaction, you're exchanging private information. And whereas when you use cash, it's completely anonymous.
Many cashless venues like Canada's Wonderland and Rogers Centre have come up with a workaround. A reverse ATM. You insert a $50 bill and it spits out a debit card. Because they may not take your cash, but they still want your money. For CBC Radio, I'm Ellis Cho.
Thanks very much, Ellis. Just about 27 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Faith Fundal. Nemesis is preparing to release her debut album sometime later this year. While the release date hasn't yet been announced, she just shared the second single from it. It's called You Wore It Better. Take a listen.
Don't get close, you're gonna hate me. 'Cause once you know what's lying underneath, judgment shows I'm not deceiving. And you chose how you want to see.
The latest from Nemesis, that was a track called You Wore It Better. About 29 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And lots to come here on the program Radio Noon. Of course, starting at the top of the hour with the call-in segment starting at 12:30. The host of that program, Janet Stewart, also in studio now to talk about what the big call-in segment is about. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning. I think it's appropriate that today's call-in is about sun safety. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot. And think of all those people out in the Folk Fest grounds, right? With all that sun beating down on all of us. We're going to talk a little bit about sun safety today because there are some misconceptions, some real... not misconceptions, misinformation put out there on TikTok videos right now about sunscreen, spreading some disinformation. So we're going to set the record straight today, and we want to hear your questions. Our guest today is from Melanoma, Canada, and if you've got questions about, do you put on your sunscreen first or your bug spray?
Right.
Because you need them both.
Yeah,
call in.
It makes a difference.
If you have a question or a comment about this, give us a call. You can do it right now, 204-788-3797 to leave a message.
It's going to be a great conversation.
Thank you.
It's Janet Stewart, host of Radio Noon. I'm Faith Fundal. We'll tell you about the weather coming up after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's hazy. It's 20 degrees out there. We're headed to 29. The Humidex will feel like 33. On the eve of the start of the Winnipeg Folk Festival, harm reduction advocates are asking for some kind of drug testing on site to keep people safe. Arlene Last-Kolb at Mom Stop the Harm says the number of drug-related deaths are on the rise in Manitoba. She says drug use at music festivals is an open secret, and having testing available at Folkfest, she says, can save lives.
It is everybody's responsibility in a toxic drug supply that we have every day. And we know that people are getting their substances from the street. And we know that fentanyl is showing up in stuff like mushrooms, cocaine, right? The kind of things that people use at festivals.
In a statement, the Winnipeg Folk Fest says it does not have the legal authority to provide drug testing, which requires a federal exemption and specialized insurance. Last-Kolb says if there is no testing on site, people should have their drugs tested before they go. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it's not just men accused of sexual exploitation. RCMP have announced charges against a woman and 6 men in connection with an exploitation and trafficking case in Portage la Prairie. Police alleged a woman lured 2 15-year-old girls into performing sex acts on men in exchange for drugs and money. Stephen Sauer is the director of cybertip.ca, a tip line that's part of the Centre for Child Protection.
There are more males that we see coming through the tip line that are reported in terms of the offender side of things or the alleged offender side of things. But we definitely do have females being reported as instigators in these types of crimes as well.
The woman has been charged with multiple counts of child luring and trafficking. The men are charged with offenses including sexual interference and making child pornography. RCMP say they are looking to identify a third girl who they believe was also exploited. More than 100 people waved Ukrainian flags and sang during a rally in downtown Winnipeg last night. Missile strikes killed at least 44 people throughout Ukraine Monday, including 4 children and 2 people at a children's hospital in Kyiv. Mariana Sklepovich is with Ukrainian Resistance Winnipeg. She organized last night's rally and has relatives living in parts of Ukraine.
You feel a sense of hopelessness, especially being so far away, having family there still and worrying about them and not really being able to do, anything to really help them concretely in the moment is so difficult.
A United Nations mission says there is a high likelihood a Russian missile hit the children's hospital. The Kremlin claims Ukrainian anti-missiles fire was responsible. Well, tougher rules could be coming for owners of vacant buildings in Winnipeg. Mayor Scott Gillingham's Inner Circle has approved a motion calling for enhanced standards for boarding up properties. It would also increase fees for vacant building inspections. Cheryl Martins has tracked the number of vacant buildings in the Spence neighborhood. She supports these changes, but says it doesn't address the underlying problem of why there are so many empty properties.
There needs to be a new effort to try and encourage either the city or somebody to build on these properties, because the vacant lots are just sort of a reminder that things are going downhill in the neighborhood.
The motion still needs approval from City Council. The Hudson's Bay store at Winnipeg's CF Polo Park Mall was closed yesterday. A sign on the door says the closure is due to scheduled maintenance. A spokesperson for the retail chain blamed the closure on heat wave-induced stress on the store's cooling and ventilation systems. At least 4 other Bay stores across Canada are closed for the same reason. Those are in BC, 3 of them in BC, and 1 is in Ontario. Hudson's Bay says the closures are temporary. A second Bay store in Winnipeg at St. Vital Centre is still open. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Our website is always open. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's always nice working with you.
You too. See you tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow. That is Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. This is the last couple of minutes on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And of course, on your CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Thanks very much for watching and listening today, keeping us company. Abby Adeyemi is also keeping us company following the weather.
Yeah, across the province, let's start with Winnipeg. 20 degrees at the moment. We're heading towards a hazy high of 29. It's going to feel hotter than that, while the northern areas like Thompson and Churchill may see showers and thunderstorm, and a heat warning is in effect for that part of the province. Down south, expect sunny skies, hazy conditions, highs hovering around 29 degrees, and it's going to be feeling close to 35. So you might want to brace for that, because that's the condition from Brandon all the way down to Morris.
That kind of day. All right. Thank you. Abby Adeyemi, our tech and music producer. Corey Funk is our show director, also has been following the morning commute. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, really, the only call we got on the commuter line was about the lineup at Birds Hill for folks getting to the campground at Folkfest. But here in the city, I haven't heard any major issues, but I'll be back tomorrow to hear if there is any other major issues out there.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget Radio Noon. The 12:30 call-in portion is going to be about sun and sunscreen. So if you are heading/are at Birds Hill Park, you may want to listen because you will need that sunscreen. That's a conversation happening with host Janet Stewart at 12:30 on Radio Noon. Chloe Friesen is going to be on Up to Speed this afternoon. Stay tuned for that as well. They'll be talking about the weather. Mag-ingat po kayo and take good care wherever you are. Thanks as well to Brad Lillies, who's our streaming producer. I'm Faith Fundal. The Current is next.